Chapter 747. There were many reasons why Yu Qianshou had to go to the fence meeting. The mortals here definitely could not see the purple fire, so he had to contact the immortals here to find out. If ordinary immortals did not know, then he had to find a way to find high-level immortals in the immortal cities. If even the high-level immortals in the immortal cities did not know, then the purple fire was very likely hidden underground. It was much more troublesome to find things underground than above ground. He would probably have to find the meditation cultivators who lived here for a long time. And to meditate here, he still had to find the immortals in the immortal world to find out where the entrance to the underground was. In short, to find the purple fire, he could not avoid interacting with the immortals here. The fence meeting was a good place to start. There was another thing that he was thinking about. What would happen if Bai Changchun went to challenge the immortal lords and the netherworld generals? Although he did not seem to care, he was actually very conflicted and anxious to find out more information. However, with his and immortal Lord Crocodile's current cultivation, the Eastern Holy Land was not a place for them to act presumptuously. They could only advance step by step and find out more information. Thus, he had to go to the fence meeting. Seeing that he was unhappy, Bolli asked in surprise, "Why must we go to the fence meeting?" He could not understand. Participating in the fence meeting was a very dangerous thing. Unless they had no other choice, which tribe would be willing to take such a risk? Now that they had the conditions to not participate, wasn't that a good thing? "You idiot!" Yu Qianshou cursed in his heart, but his face showed a pained expression. He pointed at Bolli and the others and lectured, "No wonder the cannibals have never been strong. It's because our tribesmen flatter men like you who do not know how to be prepared for danger in times of peace. Just because of a bag of gold, you lost your fighting spirit and did not think about improving. Isn't it better to earn more gold for your tribesmen? If you have the ability to earn more gold than your tribesmen can spend in a few lifetimes, then the future generations of cannibal warriors can protect their tribesmen and reproduce without having to bleed and die for the fence meeting. Many generations of warriors. How many tribesmen can you produce? A bunch of cowards, you disappoint me. What **T reason?" Immortal Lord Crocodile's expression twitched as he turned his head to the side, not wanting to listen anymore. However, Bolli and the others thought the same. They were reprimanded until their faces turned red and they lowered their heads in shame. After a while, Bolli raised his head and asked, "What if the Wasi retaliate against our people?" "Don't worry about it." Yu Qianshou patted his chest confidently and said, "I just went to pee and bumped into a tile. The Wasi said that because they are true warriors, they will defeat us fair and square at the fence, and then they will take revenge on your people. If they lose, they will accept their defeat wholeheartedly and will not pursue this matter any further. They will treat it as if it never happened." Bolli and the other three looked at each other. Suddenly, one of them asked in a weak voice, "What if we don't get to fight against the Swaxi? Why are there so many ifs?" Yu Qianshou roared angrily. He pointed at them and said, A bunch of cowards. I'm ashamed to be associated with you, and you call yourselves warriors of the cannibal tribe. If you want it back, go back and return the gold coins to me." Immortal Lord Crocodile sighed and shook his head. He had seen shameless people, but never so shameless. Just now, he said he was giving them gold coins, and now he wanted them back. Bolli clutched the money pouch tightly. Gold coins were the lifeline of the tribesmen. They could be used to buy salt for the entire tribe. It had nothing to do with personal honor or disgrace. How could they just give it back? The four's faces turned a little green, angered by the words cowards. The four looked at each other and nodded heavily. Bolli said firmly, "Let's go to the fence." Yu Qianshou was stunned. These people really changed their minds quickly. He retracted his hand, and the gloominess on his face dissipated. He coughed and said, "All right, it's good that you know your mistake. Let's not waste any more time and hurry on." Under Immortal Lord Crocodile's infinite disdain, Yu Qianshou took the lead and walked out. The corpses on the street had been taken away by someone, leaving only a few pools of blood. Many people stared at them. Bolli and the other three entered the alley and went to the stable at the back to get the horses. After a while, Yu Qianshou felt something was wrong. He walked to the alley and looked around, muttering, Why are they taking so long to get the horses? Immortal Lord Crocodile sneered. The horses have long been taken away by someone else. Where can they get their own horses? What do you mean? Yu Qianqiu turned back and asked. Then he reacted and quickly walked into the alley. There were more than a dozen horses in the spacious stable, but the 6 they rode were not there. Boli and the other 3 were anxiously looking around the stable. Yu Qianqiu squinted at the entrance of the stable. He slowly tilted his head and asked Immortal Lord Crocodile, who was slowly approaching, "You knew that our horses were taken away. Why didn't you stop them?" Immortal Lord Crocodile sneered. "Who do you think I am? A groom? Do I have the obligation to look after your horses? Besides, you didn't tell me in advance." Yu Qianqiu was about to say something, but he swallowed it. There was no need to get into a fight over such a small matter. Otherwise, he would be the one at a disadvantage. As soon as he turned around, he saw Boli running over and saying anxiously, "Our horses are gone. They were taken away. Of course they are gone," Yu Qianqiu said indifferently. He sneered in his heart. Lust City's expenses were not low, and many tribes would rush to register on the last day to reduce unnecessary expenses. If they missed the registration time, the other tribes would not open the back door again. The person who stole the horses had obviously seen this and wanted to break the cannibals' leg strength so that they would miss the opportunity to compete. Perhaps the other party saw that they were skilled, so they did not do it openly, but secretly. No wonder they paid the bill so cheaply. If this was not trying to hide something, what was it? Ah! The 4 screamed. They could roughly guess what was going on. Boli said anxiously, "Then what should we do? Without the horses, we definitely can't get to Lust City in time to register." "Are you stupid? Why do you have to ask me such a simple thing?" Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and pointed to the horses in the stable. "Others can take away your horses, but can't you take away other people's horses? Can't you use your brain? This is not good." Boli looked around the stable and said nervously, "We didn't see who took our horses. What if it wasn't the owner of these horses?" Yu Qianqiu looked at him as if he was looking at an idiot and sneered. "You're crazy. That's nonsense. If we saw who it was, would the horses still be taken away? Stop talking nonsense. Who cares who it is? 1 horse each. Let's hurry." After that, he went straight into the stable, untied the ropes, and pulled out 2 horses. He gave one to Immortal Crocodile and jumped on the horse's back. Boli and the other 3 were not as mentally strong as him. He could even be a thief and act like it was a matter of course. They pulled out 1 horse each and ran towards the street. Before leaving, Immortal Crocodile saw Yu Qianqiu bend his finger and flicked a red light into the stable. It quickly disappeared into the mountain of fodder, and he did not know what Yu Qianqiu was trying to do. Rushing onto the street, Yu Qianqiu swung his pigtails and opened a path in front of the horse, scaring the pedestrians on the street and causing them to dodge in panic. Just as the sound of horse hooves sounded, several people ran out of the shop and chased after them. "Horse thieves, stop right there." Boli and the other 3 followed behind Yu Qianqiu with a guilty conscience and quickly rushed out of the town. Not long after they rushed out of the town, they suddenly felt the sky change color. It was a little red, and the town behind them screamed, "Fire! Put out the fire! Quick, put out the fire!" Boli and the other 3 looked back and were instantly shocked. What a huge fire! It soared into the sky, and the ferocious fire quickly spread from the center of the town to the whole town. Inside the town, screams and screams could be heard incessantly. A large group of people rushed out of the town like a colony of ants, rolling and crawling as they escaped from the town. It was unknown how many people could not escape and would die in the sea of fire. Boli and the other 3 felt a lingering fear when they saw this scene. If they had come out a little later, they might not have been able to come out again. Immortal Crocodile retracted his gaze from the raging fire in the small town and looked at Yu Qianqiu, who was galloping forward on his horse. Among the 6 of them, he was the only one who didn't turn back to look at the commotion behind him. Immortal Crocodile immediately transmitted his voice. "Although they are unruly people, your punishment is a little too much. After all, they are just ignorant mortals. Why implicate so many innocent people? Oh, it seems that you are quite sympathetic. I was afraid that there were too few people who died to move your apathetic heart. Yu Qianqiu suddenly turned back, his eyes cold, and transmitted his voice coldly. This fire is for you to see. I just want to tell you that we are mutually beneficial and equal. No one owes anyone anything. Everyone should help each other. What happened before really hurt me. You could have stopped others from taking our horses away, but you turned a blind eye to it, as if it had nothing to do with you. Can I understand that you are hindering me? Or are you trying to make fun of me? I don't think something like this should happen between us. You should understand now that those people who did not escape the sea of fire were actually killed by you. If you could have stopped our horses from being stolen, then these people would have lived a good life. I hope that these people's deaths can be a small reminder to you that there should not be any unpleasant things between us. We still have a long way to go. And I need to take this as a warning. Immortal Crocodile's eyes flashed with a trace of emotion. This kind of reminder would be unforgettable even if he was cold-hearted. However, he snorted coldly. You were the one who killed them, but you want to implicate me. What nonsense! No matter what he said, Yu Qianqiu did not say anything else. He turned back and urged the horse forward. Immortal Crocodile also kept quiet. The six of them galloped quickly, and the burning town gradually disappeared behind them. Di Rong Kingdom's great snow mountain. Under the bright sun, the snow-capped peaks were white, and the magnificent ice palace reflected a psychedelic color. Yan Zhuixing, dressed in a black robe, slowly walked out of the ice palace's gate. He walked expressionlessly to the ice cliff and stopped. If he took another step forward, it would be a bottomless abyss. There was mist rising from the ice cliff, gently lingering around his body. The ice and jade sculptures on the cliff were crystal clear. The steep ice layer at the bottom of the cliff, which looked like it was chiseled by knives and axes, showed a magnificent light blue color. Coupled with the mist, it was like a paradise on earth. Although it was under the bright sun, Yan Zhuixing, who stood in the mist on the ice cliff, gave people a gloomy and terrifying feeling. His cold eyes stared into the distance without moving. Bing Qingzi was in the middle of the gate of the ice palace, with Yan Bugui, Manhu, and Third Exine on both sides. They were all staring at the motionless black figure in front of the ice cliff. What's wrong with Xing? Yan Bugui asked Bing Qingzi uneasily. He should have been happy to see Yan Zhuixing come out with all four limbs intact. Who knew that Yan Zhuixing, who came out of the secret chamber in the belly of the mountain, would turn a blind eye to his father? He brushed past him stiffly, forcing the joy on his face to be replaced by uneasiness. Suddenly, Yan Zhuixing, who was in front of the ice cliff, opened his arms. The mist around his body was quickly shaken off. Ah! He looked up to the sky and roared crazily. His voice was hoarse and deep. It didn't sound like a human's voice at all. It was like the voice of an ancient, fierce beast. The tone of the voice changed from the bottom of the abyss, as if a magical beast that had been sleeping for countless years was about to wake up. The roar became more and more brutal and louder. It scared the surrounding snow-capped peaks to the point that avalanches occurred one after another. The rumbling sound reverberated everywhere. Everyone inside the gate of the ice palace felt that the sound could penetrate their bodies and pull their hearts and lungs. Their faces changed dramatically. Except for Bing Qingzi, who could still stand still, the others were all shaky and had a splitting headache. They covered their ears with their hands and tried their best to resist, but they couldn't stop the sound wave from invading. In the end, even Bing Qingzi's face began to turn pale. He suddenly raised his head and found that cracks also appeared in the ice palace. He immediately yelled, "Yan Zhuixing, control yourself." More than half of the ice cliff, which already had a large area of cracks, collapsed. Yan Zhuixing, who was standing in front of the cliff, fell into the abyss. The roar continued to come from below and suddenly stopped. The people inside the gate finally heaved a sigh of relief. That sound was too uncomfortable. Not to mention their splitting headache, their internal organs were all messed up, giving them a feeling that death was better than living. Before they could react, Bing Qingzi had already teleported to the sky above the abyss and stared down. Suddenly, Bing Qingzi's pupils shrank, and he yelled angrily, Yin Juexing. Before he could finish his words, a shadow shot out from the bottom of the cliff and collided with Bing Qingzi with a majestic and unparalleled aura. With a loud bang, Bing Qingzi, who quickly pushed out his palms to block the attack, let out a muffled groan and spat out a mouthful of blood. He was sent flying dozens of meters away. The shadow appeared. Yin Juexing, who was wearing a black robe, had disheveled hair and his face couldn't be seen clearly. He was floating above the abyss in a horse stance. His movements were like a bow shooting a huge eagle. His whole body was surrounded by black murderous aura. One of his raised fists was shrouded in black light. Under his disheveled hair, a deep voice came out slowly, Devil Fist. Chapter 748. It was quiet inside and outside the Ice Palace. Everyone in the Ice Palace who had yet to recover from the heart-wrenching roar were all dumbfounded. They couldn't believe the scene in front of them. Yin Juexing actually attacked his master, Bing Qingzi. The scariest thing was that he actually injured Bing Qingzi with just one punch. Everyone clearly saw the scene of Bing Qingzi vomiting blood. Bing Qingzi had the cultivation of late divine transformation realm. How many people in the world could injure him? Manhu and his brothers quickly flew to the sky and anxiously checked on their master's injury. Yin Bugui and Third Exian quickly flew to the side of Yin Juexing, whose hair was disheveled. Yin Bugui looked at Bing Qingzi, who was squinting his eyes, and anxiously scolded Yin Juexing. "Xing, are you crazy? How dare you attack your master?" The black light circulating on Yin Juexing's fist disappeared, and the black aura surrounding his body also retracted back into his body. He put down his fist that was raised to the sky and slowly raised his head. His long black hair flowed like silk and gently rested on his shoulders. The hairband that bound his hair was no longer there. Half of his face was covered by his long hair, while the other half of his face was staring at Yin Bugui emotionlessly with his cold eyes. Yin Bugui was startled by his son's stare. His heart trembled, and he was instantly speechless. "Master, are you okay?" Manhu and his brothers asked anxiously. Bing Qingzi raised his hand and wiped the corner of his mouth. A smear of bright red was smeared on his palm. He looked down with a complicated expression and slowly shook his head. "Don't worry, I'm fine." Yin Juexing's sudden attack didn't really injure him, but the power of that punch really shocked him. Logically speaking, he should have been able to block Yin Juexing's punch with his cultivation. However, the explosive power contained in Yin Juexing's punch was frighteningly powerful. It gave people the illusion that no matter how high their cultivation was, they would not be able to withstand it. It directly blasted through the defense that he had put up to defend and injured him. The Zhen Yuan in Bing Qingzi's body was still faintly dispersing. It was not that Yin Juexing's cultivation was higher than his. In fact, there was still a long way to go. However, the power in this punch was quite strange and overbearing. The powerful penetrating power and explosive power perfectly combined together. It was very frightening. It cannot be judged by the level of cultivation. Yin Juexing raised his head and looked at the sky. With a swoosh, he appeared in front of Bing Qingzi with a teleportation. The lower half of his face was abnormally cold, especially his eyes, which were devoid of any emotion. Manhu furiously pointed at Yin Juexing and shouted, "Yin Juexing, you ungrateful bastard, you actually dare to attack Master. If it wasn't for Master, how could you be where you are today? If not for Master, you would have lost your life in Spirit Fong Valley." Bing Qingzi raised his hand slightly and stopped him from continuing. He stared at Yin Juexing and asked, "What happened just now?" To be honest, he was not happy that Yin Juexing attacked him. It was just that he was more composed than his disciple. A bitter smile appeared on the lower half of his face under his long hair. He cupped his hands at them and said, "Master, senior brothers, please forgive me. I don't know what happened just now. I couldn't control myself and attacked Master recklessly." The Master and disciples looked at each other speechlessly. The angry expression on their faces gradually eased. They all suspected that there was something wrong with this demonic art. Bing Qingzi stared at Yin Juexing and said with an abnormally heavy expression, isn't a little too fast to break through to early spirit, severing realm in such a short time? Why do I feel that it's a little abnormal? Did you notice anything unusual? Man Hu and the others were shocked. They quickly looked at Yin Juexing and realized that they could no longer see through his cultivation. The senior and junior brothers looked at each other in shock. It was too unbelievable that he could break through to early spirit, severing realm in such a short time. Yin Juexing muttered slowly, "It's too fast. I don't know what's going on either. According to the demonic book, it would take at least 10 years to reach my current cultivation. It's impossible to be so fast. However, when I was cultivating, I seemed to feel a magical power in my body. Once I started cultivating demonic arts, that magical power guided me to break through the shackles and solved all the doubts I had when I was cultivating. It made my cultivation advance by leaps and bounds. It's like 1,000 miles in a day. It's so fast that I can't even believe it myself." Not to mention Man Hu and the others. Even Bing Qingzi felt as if he had heard a fantasy. He looked at Yin Juexing with an indescribable expression. Bing Qingzi sighed slightly and said, "I can't give you any advice on this. You can only rely on yourself to figure it out slowly. If you discover that something is amiss, it is better to stop first and think about it clearly before continuing to cultivate. Do not be impatient for quick results. Logically speaking, I should be happy that your cultivation is progressing at a godly speed, but I keep feeling that something is wrong. It is simply too fast. You should be more careful." Yin Juexing bowed slightly, as if he was obeying orders. He said, "It's because I found something wrong that I stopped cultivating secretly. I'm going to think carefully about where the problem is. Just now, I rashly attacked Master because of this magical power. I couldn't help it at that moment. Please forgive me, Master." "Since you couldn't help it, don't mention it again." Bing Qingzi's eyes flickered. He said, "The power of that punch just now is indeed extraordinary. With your early spirit severing realm cultivation, you can actually break through my defense. It seems that you have mastered the demonic fist that matches spirit severing realm. I'm looking forward to the power of your great demonic fist." "Yes." Yin Juexing put on an obedient look. In fact, when he attacked Bing Qingzi just now, it wasn't because he couldn't help it. It was because of the rapid growth of his cultivation. He was overconfident and wanted to find someone to test the power of his demonic fist. When he fell off the ice cliff, he suddenly saw Bing Qingzi appear in the sky. He suddenly had an idea. He couldn't test the power of the demonic fist if his cultivation was too low. Bing Qingzi's cultivation was perfect for him to test. However, he was also worried that the demonic fist would be too overbearing and seriously injure Bing Qingzi, as described in the demonic book. After all, he still had to rely on Bing Qingzi's power in the future. He couldn't be reckless. Therefore, he only used 60% of his strength. As a result, Bing Qingzi was still slightly injured. At this moment, he was inexplicably surprised. However, he didn't show it on his face. Instead, he said that he couldn't help it. Bing Qingzi heaved a sigh of relief and turned to Man Hu. "How's the situation in the cultivation world recently?" He asked, "What's the situation in the cultivation world?" Recently, he had been guarding Yin Juexing and knew little about the situation in the cultivation world. Therefore, he asked this question. Man Hu immediately bowed and reported. After the countries joined hands and suffered losses in the cultivation world of Huaxia, they have temporarily stopped fighting. They are discussing with each other about the next attack. Generally speaking, the cultivation world is still peaceful. However, there are some movements in the secular world. Firstly, the rebel army supported by Yu Qianqiu has already swept 2/3 of the territory. If there are no other accidents, the outcome is already a foregone conclusion. Secondly, the emperor of Baiwan country has passed away. The new crown prince is about to succeed the throne. Apart from these, there are no movements for now. Bing Qingzi nodded slightly without saying anything. Yin Juexing, who had been listening attentively, asked indifferently with killing intent flashing in his eyes, "Eldest senior brother, is there any news about Yu Qianqiu in the cultivation world recently?" Everyone knew the resentment between him and Yu Qianqiu. It could be said that the hatred between them was getting deeper and deeper. It had reached the point where one of them would not stop until one of them died. However, that Yu Qianqiu could be considered to be worthy of admiration. Yan Zhuixing's devil arts were strange and overbearing, yet he had suffered a loss at Yu Qianqiu's hands time and time again. The last time, Yu Qianqiu had even almost lost his life. Man who took a deep look at him and said after a pause, "Our ice palace has been paying attention to the news of Yu Qianqiu. However, that guy seems to have disappeared. Not to mention the countries, even the cultivation world of Huaxia doesn't have any news about him. We don't know where he has gone." Yu Qianqiu. Yan Zhuixing slowly raised his broken and regenerated arm. He clenched his fists so hard that cracking sounds could be heard. He gritted his teeth and said, "I'm destined to compete with you in this life. Either you die or I live. You can't hide even if you want to." Then he suddenly turned around and cupped his hands at Bing Qingzi. "I want to go out and find Yu Qianqiu for revenge." Bing Qingzi frowned and said in a low voice, "Don't be reckless. There must be something we don't know about Yu Qianqiu, who can make a name for himself in the cultivation world with the cultivation of crossing calamity stage. Moreover, he is from the demon ghost territory. If something happens to him, the current torture envoy of the demon ghost territory, Niu Yud, will definitely not ignore it. You don't have to take revenge now. When you are successful in your demonic cultivation and no one in the world can stop you, Yu Qianqiu will be at your mercy. If you go out now and encounter an accident, you won't be so lucky every time." The ending was nothing but a warning to him. "I can't save you in time every time. Master, please understand." Yan Zhuixing bowed deeply and said, "As long as Yu Qianqiu doesn't die, I will feel like I have a fishbone stuck in my throat. What's more, with my current cultivation and the new demonic cultivation, I'm confident that I can escape from anyone even if I encounter an accident. Master, please let me go out of the mountain to avenge this deep hatred." Bing Qingzi knew he couldn't persuade him since he was so resolute, but he couldn't ask him to do it as a normal master and disciple relationship. Alas, he could only let out a long sigh and flashed into the ice palace, as if to say, "Do as you see fit." The other disciples also frowned as they looked at each other. Man who reminded, "Yu Qianqiu comes and goes like a ghost. Even if you leave the mountain, how will you be able to find him in this vast world? If I can't find him, I'll look for him slowly. I don't believe he will hide forever. If it's really impossible, as long as he's alive, I'll have a way to force him out." After Yan Zhuixing finished his words, he turned into a shadow and disappeared into the distance. The 6 riders galloped in a straight line on the vast lush plain. Green plants were rarely seen in the surroundings. Occasionally, they could see clusters of drought-resistant short thorns. 6 surging trails of yellow dust followed behind the galloping horse hooves. Yu Qianqiu swung his braids around in a flashy manner as he looked around. He clicked his tongue in admiration. Such a flat and vast yellow plain was truly rare. Under the setting sun, the lush plain was filled with a refreshing color. Between the heaven and the earth, there was a warm orange color. The rolling yellow dust could also be seen in the distance. The sound of horse hooves could be heard. Obviously, it was a passerby who had the same goal as them. Along the way, they galloped without any scruples. Soon, a green dot appeared in the distance. As the green dot gradually expanded in their sight, the magnificent city hidden behind the green forest appeared. After passing through the forest, there were farmlands on both sides of the road. There were thriving crops, and there was a small river that was 2 to 3 meters wide. Many people were busy working on it. Warriors from many tribes gathered on this road. They slowed down and came to the ancient lush wall that was more than 10 meters tall. A group of people surrounded the city gate. They were all warriors from various tribes who came to register. After going through the normal procedures, they would be let in by the city guards. As they approached the city gate, Boli and the other 3 tribesmen immediately looked around. Yu Qianqiu knew what they were looking for. They were looking for the tribesmen who lived in the city. They were the warriors who had participated in the fence meet. They had obtained a right to live in the city. Without the help of the tribesmen who lived in the city, it was impossible to register for the competition. The main purpose was to prevent people from disrupting the order in the city. This rule was very cruel. If Yu Qianshou and the others were brought in by the cannibals who lived in the city, once Yu Qianshou and the others caused trouble, the entire cannibal tribe would be implicated. It was said that the punishment was very severe. Therefore, under normal circumstances, for the safety of the tribesmen, no tribesman would easily bring outsiders into the city. This also prevented people from sneaking into the city to cause trouble. It was because of this reason that Yu Qianshou decided to get close to the cannibals. Otherwise, he wouldn't have the patience to waste time with the cannibals. He would have disguised himself as a tribesman and entered the city long ago. Suddenly, someone jumped up and waved at the noisy city gate. "Boli! Boli!" Yu Qianshou glanced over and saw a tall man wearing simple and crude clothes squeezing through the crowd. Boli and the other tribesmen shouted in surprise. Guan, they jumped down from their horses and hugged each other, patting each other's shoulders. They seemed very happy. Yu Qianshou did not want to be outdone. He jumped down from his horse and opened his arms, pretending to hug them passionately. He smiled and patted their shoulders. He also winked at Immortal Lord Crocodile, who was still on his horse. It seemed to be saying, "Don't sit there alone, okay? It will make others suspicious." Immortal Lord Crocodile's face twitched, but he still forced a smile. He jumped down from his horse and pretended to be happy to see his tribesmen, just like Yu Qianshou. Secretly, he gritted his teeth and sent a voice transmission. "You brat, aren't you tired of doing such things all day long? TSK, don't be surprised." Yu Qianshou replied angrily, "If you don't do such things, it will attract the attention of the celestial masters in the city, and they will chase us everywhere. That will be really tiring." His words were crude, but he was right. Immortal Lord Crocodile was tongue-tied and speechless. He finally understood that what this guy said was the truth. It would be better for him to look for less stimulation in the future. Chapter 749. Guan, who was chatting with Boli and the other three, noticed two unfamiliar faces joining them. He could not help but be startled, but from the way they were dressed, they were undoubtedly from the cannibals' tribe. He couldn't help but say, "Boli." The Boli grabbed his wrist and whispered. The elders agreed. "Bring us into the city first, and we'll tell you what happened later." Guan looked solemnly at the other three tribesmen. Seeing that they were nodding, he immediately calmed down and brought the 6 people with the horses to register. When it was their turn to register, Guan showed his token to the registration staff at the city gate and successfully registered them. Immortal Lord Crocodile's name was changed to Denyo, while the others' names remained the same. After all, the names of the others, including Yu Qianshou, would not attract much attention. Only Immortal Lord Crocodile's name was famous in the immortal world, so he had to change his name. As for why he was called Denyo, it was naturally because someone was called Nyo Yud. After passing through the city gate, a bustling city that was different from the lush plain outside appeared in front of everyone. The wide streets were filled with exquisitely built, simple, and luxurious shops. Boli and the others were a little dazzled. Immortal Lord Crocodile's face was full of emotion. He probably did not expect that a city would appear in this place sealed off by the heaven and earth formation. The pedestrians on the streets could easily distinguish between those who were from the city and those who were from other tribes. First, there was the difference in clothing. The people in the city all wore cloth clothes, and few would wear things like animal skins. Second, there was the difference in their behavior. Those who walked on the streets and kept looking around, as if everything was new to them. Just like Yu Qianshou, who had a head full of pigtails, one could tell at a glance that they were foreigners. Most of the people in the city who wore cloth clothes looked at the tribesmen with disdain. If not for the fact that the city lord needed these people to participate in the triennial fence meeting, they would have chased all these natives out of the city. Guan knew that his tribesmen rarely had the opportunity to enter, so he introduced the entire Lust Plain in detail as he walked. Lust City's land area was not small, as could be seen from the more than 300,000 permanent residents within the city. However, tribal warriors like Guan, who had obtained residency rights, did the dirtiest and most tiring chores in the city, making up less than 1/20th of the city's population. This was equivalent to more than 10,000 warriors from various tribes serving the 300,000 locals in the city. The so-called city dwellers were actually the nobles and their family members who managed the various cities in the Holy East land. Even if they did nothing every month, they could still receive 1 gold coin per head, which was equivalent to 100 silver coins. And tribal warriors like Gu-un, who had obtained residency rights, were similar to those who worked in the city. However, even if they worked themselves to death, they would only be able to earn 50 silver coins a month at most. Most of them would only earn around 20 silver coins a month. But relatively speaking, it was still much better than hunting in the tribe. However, due to the high cost of living in the city, the warriors of each tribe only had a few silver coins left after filling their stomachs. In fact, their lives were far from being as comfortable as they were in the tribe. As long as they could hunt enough prey in the tribe, their lives were still relatively comfortable. In short, their lives were much worse than when they were in the tribe. However, the tribesmen needed them to stay in the city because salt could only be bought in the city. Usually, the tribesmen were not allowed to enter the city. Even if there was extra game to sell, they could only rely on the tribesmen who were struggling in the city to do it. Yu Qianshou felt that the immortals' rule and management of the city and beyond were a little ridiculous. Because the entire continent was sealed by the heaven and earth Qingquan formation, ordinary people couldn't get their hands on salt. After all, people couldn't live without salt, and the immortals relied on salt to rule and manage the entire continent. These so-called city dwellers actually lived in a huge cage. From birth to death, almost no one could take a step out of the city. Only those who were restricted to farming outside the city walls and providing the city with fresh fruits and vegetables were allowed to enter and leave the walled city. However, they were only able to leave the city to work in the fields. Although there was only a wall between the city and the city, it was like 2 different worlds. The city dwellers thought that they lived a decent life, but in fact, they paid for their lifelong freedom. They would never know how rich and colorful the outside world was, and how vast the outside world was. As for the tribes living outside, they maintained the most primitive way of life without being disturbed. Yu Qianshou couldn't figure out what these trapped immortals wanted. Why did they want to turn the continent into 2 extremes? What puzzled Yu Qianshou the most was, what was the purpose of the fence gathering? What were the 100 warriors who won every competition doing in the immortal city? The group was chatting as they walked. Suddenly, 2 boys crossed the street. When one of them saw Yu Qianshou, he tugged on the other boy's sleeve and gestured for him to look at Yu Qianshou. The 2 boys were about 7 or 8 years old. They looked at Yu Qianshou as if they were looking at a monster, and they couldn't help but laugh out loud. The group stopped in their tracks. They didn't know what the 2 children were laughing about. Yu Qianshou was even more confused. Could it be that his temperament was so extraordinary that even the children could tell that he was a fake native? Sigh. The children's eyes were pure, and they could tell people apart. Yu Qianshou looked around proudly, showing off his extraordinary temperament. Unexpectedly, the 2 children looked at each other and smiled wickedly. They spat a few times and only stopped when the saliva in their mouths was dry. Immortal Crocodile raised half of his eyebrows. The expressions on his face were very colorful. He seemed very happy to see Yu Qianshou being treated like this. Boli and the others looked at each other, a little confused. Guwen's expression didn't look good. Yu Qianshou wasn't wearing any clothes. Looking at the spit on his body, he was a little confused. He didn't know what this meant. He comforted himself. Perhaps this was similar to the water splashing festival in Yunnan. It was a kind of etiquette. It meant that I was very popular with children. I'll endure it. If I really can't endure it, I'll just spit on them. However, illusions were always easily shattered. The ridicule of the passers-by made Yu Qianshou feel that something was wrong. Yu Qianshou pulled a long face and asked, "Little brat, why did you spit on me?" One of the children put his hands on his waist and pointed at Yu Qianshou. He said disdainfully, "You're so small, and yet you came to participate in the fence meeting. Aren't you afraid of embarrassing yourself? Damn native, scram back to where you came from." "Am I small?" Yu Qianqiu asked himself. His height was not bad, but when he looked back at Boli and the others, he immediately understood. His height was not bad outside, but compared to the warriors of various tribes who were more than 2 meters tall, he was indeed thin and short. Son of AB asterisk TCH. You think that I'm easy to bully because I'm small? How dare you spit on me? Yu Qianqiu's face completely darkened. Who knew that he wasn't the only one being bullied by these 2 children? The other child ran in front of Gu and pointed at his braided hair. He said, "You're obviously a poor and dirty native, but you still want to learn to wear our clothes. Scram out of Lust City." Tui Tui. He started to spit on Guin again. Obviously, the miserable Gu and was despised by the little boy because he wore cloth clothes and had braided hair. But even so, Guin's face was livid. He didn't dare to flare up because he couldn't afford to offend the natives in the city. When the child facing Yu Qianqiu saw that his companion was spitting to his heart's content, he immediately wanted to compete with him. He started to spit again at Yu Qianqiu. F***CK. Yu Qianqiu looked around, and his gaze paused on a small alley on the side of the road. Not only was he not angry, but a warm smile appeared on his face. Facing the spitting saliva, he stretched out his hand and showed the thing in his hand. He smiled amiably and said, "Little friend, do you want it?" That child was stunned for a moment and revealed a stunned look. He wiped the saliva from the corner of his mouth and stopped spitting. He even called his companion over. Yu Qianqiu then showed the other child what he was holding in his hand, only to see a handful of gold coins appear in his hand out of nowhere. "Little friend, do you want it?" Yu Qianqiu once again guided them patiently. One of the children was very shrewish. He put his hands on his waist and said, "Damn native, how do you have so much money? Where did you steal it from? Quickly give it to me, or else I'll report it to the authorities." Yu Qianqiu raised his index finger and gestured for them to be quiet. He pointed to a small alley on the side of the road and said softly, "Let's go there to talk. I have a small question to ask you. As long as you answer me, I'll give you these gold coins. How about that?" The 2 children looked at each other slyly and immediately nodded. "Let's go." They ran into the alley first and even waved at Yu Qianqiu, signaling him to come quickly. Yu Qianqiu nodded with a smile and walked in. Boli and the others looked at each other. They didn't know what Yu Qianqiu wanted to do because they didn't see clearly what Yu Qianqiu was holding in his hand. But from what the child said, it seemed to be money. Immortal Crocodile's eyelids twitched. He saw clearly that Yu Qianqiu was holding a handful of gold coins in his hand. Based on his understanding of Yu Qianqiu, he didn't think that Yu Qianqiu would be so friendly as to give gold coins for free. Could it be that this guy would even kill children? After one adult and 2 children entered the alley, the younger one immediately said, "Ask quickly if you have any questions." Yu Qianqiu looked back at the occasional pedestrians on the street behind him and pointed inside. "Go a little further in. If other adults see that you 2 children have so many gold coins, they might rob you." The 2 children agreed tacitly, thinking that Yu Qianqiu's words were very reasonable. They were obviously very familiar with the terrain here. They led Yu Qianqiu into a corner, and the child who spoke earlier said, "Ask here." Chapter 750. Yu Qianqiu looked around and found that it was a dead end with no one around. He raised his eyebrows and rubbed his chin. He stared at the 2 children and muttered, "I don't know which family these children belong to, but they are so uneducated. Since your parents treat you like treasures and don't want to educate you properly, then you should be prepared to make others unhappy and teach you a lesson. I won't stand on ceremony. I hope I can teach you a lesson in one go." He swung both of his arms and slapped out with both hands. "Papa!" The 2 children, who hadn't reacted in time, blacked out and fainted on the ground. Half of their faces were swollen. Obviously, someone didn't go easy on them, shame. The dignified torturer of the Phantom region was actually forced to kidnap children and use underhanded methods in the alley. It was really a shame. Yu Qianqiu stared at the 2 children who had fainted on the ground and shook his head. He coughed and walked out of the alley with a serious face. Boli and the others, who were waiting at the end of the street, craned their heads to look behind him, but didn't see the 2 children. Boley couldn't help but ask, "Where are those two despicable children?" Yu Qianqiu subconsciously dug his ears, then waved his hand disapprovingly and said, "Under my influence, they realized their mistakes and went home. Let's go. Don't worry about them. They're just ignorant children. There's no need to fuss over them." Immortal Crocodile felt a chill down his spine. What did he mean by no need to fuss over them? With his cultivation, he could clearly hear the sound of the two slaps. He had already guessed what Yu Qianqiu had done. The two children on the ground still hadn't moved. It's good that they know their mistakes. Boley sighed slightly, and they continued to move forward. Guan had lived in the city for a long time, so he naturally felt that something was wrong. He kept sneaking suspicious glances at Yu Qianqiu. However, the latter's face was calm and unperturbed, and he couldn't tell what had happened. Guan felt that he might be thinking too much. The tribesmen were simple and honest. Unlike the people in the city who were cunning, Guan lived at the edge of the city. When Yu Qianqiu first arrived, he thought he was in the slums of India from his previous life. If there was a hint of curry in the air, it would be even more so. There were shacks everywhere, and it looked like a slum. The people going in and out were all from different tribes. Obviously, the local city dwellers would not live here. Because the cannibals were good at producing top warriors, the only cannibal representative left in Lust City was Guan. The ones before him were either stronger than Gu and directly passed the finals to the Immortal City, or they were even weaker than Gu and directly died in the fence meet. After tying up the horses outside Guan's shed, Boley and the others went in to take a look. Yu Qianqiu, an immortal crocodile, could imagine how big the space inside was. Even if everyone went in, it would be difficult for them to stand still, so they did not go in. Yu Qianqiu looked around and kept thinking about a problem. Where would everyone stay after coming here? Would everyone have to build a shed to live in during the fence rally? The answer was yes, because the people of the other tribes were building shacks when Boley and the others came out. Their faces were not very good. From the shabby conditions in the shacks, they could see how difficult Guan's life here was. They looked at Guan with admiration. It was precisely because of the sacrifices of generations of warriors here that the tribesmen could live a carefree life. As soon as they came out, they immediately untied the dried meat from the horses' backs and moved it into the shacks. To them, they could not imagine what kind of life a warrior, who mainly ate meat, would live here on a vegetarian diet. In their excitement, they wanted to leave the good things for Guan, but Guan firmly rejected them. His reason was that the tribesmen were going to participate in the fence meet and needed meat to replenish their strength. Yu Qianqiu saw them arguing over a few pieces of meat and could not stand it anymore, so he immediately came out to make the decision. Guan kept the dried meat, and from today onwards, he would pay for everyone's food expenses during the fence meet. He also made a generous decision that everyone would go and have a big meal now. This kind of extravagant behavior was too extravagant and wasteful for Guan, who had been working hard here. Fortunately, Boley and the others knew that he was rich. After Boley secretly told Guan about Yu Qianqiu's heroic deeds, Guan no longer insisted on his own opinion. He just looked at Yu Qianqiu in surprise and doubt. This was a warrior who had lost his memory, and he was very powerful. Not only did he save the entire tribe, but he also took the risk to participate in the fence meet in place of his tribesmen. He was also very rich. Yu Qianqiu looked at Guan and said with a smile, "Guan, you are more familiar with Lust City. Take us to the restaurant with the best food." Guan was a little hesitant. Although he had never been to the restaurant with the best food, he had heard others talk about it. However, he had heard that the food there was ridiculously expensive and not something that ordinary people could afford. Could he really take out that much money? Yu Qianqiu observed his expression and knew what he was worried about. He waved his hand and said with a smile, "Just take us there. You don't have to worry about the money." Under his repeated insistence, Guan had no choice but to lead the group of people there in fear. At this time, Lust City was already shrouded in the twilight, and the streets that extended in all directions were brightly lit. Yu Qianqiu was surprised to find that the entire Lust City was actually illuminated by fluorescent stones. Once night fell, the streets would automatically be brightly lit without the need for lighting, which really saved a lot of trouble. The streets were filled with people, and many well-dressed locals had come out for a walk. It was much more lively than during the day. It seemed that for these people who had never been out of the city, taking a walk was one of the ways to pass the time. There were also many people from various tribes looking around on the streets, and they constantly attracted the locals' looks of disgust. Yu Qianshou and Immortal Lord Crocodile felt a little strange, for no other reason than that they were dressed too skimpily. It was fine when they were in the cannibals' tribe. After all, everyone was like that. However, here, there were constantly neatly dressed people passing by, and they felt uncomfortable all over. This was especially so when they bumped into the hungry woman who passed by them. When they felt her gaze on them as if she wanted to eat them up, they felt goosebumps all over their bodies. Others could not care less, but for the two of them, they always felt out of place. Even their steps felt unnatural. At this time, Yu Qianshou and Immortal Lord Crocodile stopped at the same time. The others also stopped, not knowing what they wanted to do. The two of them looked at each other, then at the clothes that Guan was wearing. Their gazes then shifted to a clothing store by the side of the road. Yu Qianshou gritted his teeth and suddenly waved at everyone. He was the first to enter the clothing store, and Immortal Lord Crocodile followed closely behind him. Boli and the others looked at each other, not knowing what the two of them wanted to do, but they followed them in. The owner of the store was a kind-looking old man in yellow. When he saw the natives coming in, he was stunned at first, then walked over with a smile and said, "Are you here to buy clothes?" He did not have the snobbish look that most people in the city had. Yu Qianshou rolled his eyes and said unhappily, "Do you have anything else to sell here?" The old man in yellow was stunned again. He looked around his store, then laughed and said, "I didn't expect that after doing business for so long, there would always be problems with the way you speak." "Huh, indeed, I only sell clothes here, nothing else." Yu Qianshou was about to ask for his best clothes for everyone when he suddenly heard Immortal Lord Crocodile's voice. "Be careful. This person is an immortal cultivator. I've seen him before, but I don't know his name. I can't see through his cultivation." Yu Qianshou was slightly shocked. Fortunately, Immortal Lord Crocodile was here, or else the other party would be suspicious. He swallowed the words that were about to come out of his mouth. Even Immortal Lord Crocodile couldn't see through his cultivation, so it was obvious that the other party's cultivation was at least at the early stage of the great immortal realm. However, it was not good to suddenly run away now. Hence, he put on a weak expression and said, "Old man, can you give each of us the cheapest clothes? I want the cheapest kind." Boli and the rest felt that it was a little strange. Previously, he seemed to be quite generous, but now, Ngu was grumbling in his heart. He could only buy the cheapest kind of clothes, but he still wanted to eat and drink in the best place. What if he had no money to pay the bill? The old man looked at them and laughed. "It's not easy for you to earn some money. Why do you need to spend money to buy clothes? Isn't it better like this?" Damn it, immortals were indeed immortals. He even rejected business that came knocking on his door. Yu Qianshou coughed and sighed. "Old man, you might not know this, but the people in the city look down on us if we don't wear clothes." The old man smiled noncommittally. His eyes flickered. "From the way you talk, you don't sound like the ordinary aborigines. May I know which tribe you are from?" How could Yu Qianshou tell him the truth? He directly asked the question and said pitifully, "Old man, you are also different from the ordinary people in the city. You don't look down on us like the others. This makes us feel better. May I know your name? I really want to know. You are an interesting person." The old man shook his head and smiled. He said bluntly, "My name is Huang Tian. Huang as in Lust City and Tian as in heaven." After which, he glanced at the figures of the few of them. He turned around and took a few clothes from the rack. He stuffed them into Yu Qianshou's hands and said, "It's rare to meet such an interesting aborigine like you. These clothes are free, and I will give them to you." Yu Qianshou was stunned. He looked at the clothes in his hands and asked suspiciously, "You really don't need money?" Huang Tian nodded his head and smiled. "Really? Thank you, old man." Yu Qianshou nodded his head and bowed his head to bid farewell. After which, he walked out with the rest of them. It seemed that he was worried that the old man would change his mind. The old man smiled and waved his hand to send them off. Chapter 751. Old Monster. I've already found out his name for you. Who is this Huang Tian? He's actually hiding here to act cool. As they walked on the street, Yu Qianqiu transmitted his voice and kept looking back. Immortal Lord Crocodile replied disapprovingly, I've never heard of this person. Maybe he was a nobody in the celestial world back then. I only met him by chance. Otherwise, if he was really a famous person in the celestial world, there's no way I wouldn't know who he is. Yu Qianqiu thought about it and agreed. They passed by an alley and pulled everyone inside to change clothes. When they came out again, they all looked like humans, except for their hairstyles. It was the first time Bowley and the others had worn such clothes, and they felt a little uncomfortable pulling and tugging at their clothes from time to time. As for Yu Qianqiu and Immortal Lord Crocodile, they felt much better with clothes to cover their bodies. A luxuriously decorated and brightly lit ancient building stood on the side of the street. It was obviously of a higher grade than the surrounding buildings. This building was called Heavenly Fragrance Restaurant, and the fluorescent stone signboard said that it was the destination of this trip. After Gu and led everyone to the opposite side of Heavenly Fragrance Restaurant, he stopped and looked at Yu Qianqiu with anxiety written all over his face. Obviously, he doubted Yu Qianqiu's financial ability. Before entering Heavenly Fragrance Restaurant, the tempting aroma of food assaulted their nostrils. Yu Qianqiu took a deep breath and rubbed his hands excitedly. Eating, drinking, and playing are the four joys of life, and eating ranks first. Everyone, eat to your heart's content today. With a wave of his hand, he looked like a Japanese soldier sweeping through a village. Immortal Lord Crocodile immediately laughed coldly and dampened his mood. Are you sure you want to eat here? Why not? Yu Qianqiu replied subconsciously. But when he saw the sneer on Immortal Lord Crocodile's face, he immediately understood the meaning behind his words. The lesson from the boutique was still fresh in his mind, and Heavenly Fragrance Restaurant was even more crowded. Don't think that people wouldn't know you're a native just because you change your clothes with a super cool hairstyle on your head. With the 7 natives spending here, it would be hard for them not to attract attention. The fragrance that wafted out from the Heavenly Fragrance Restaurant was obviously delicious. However, it was not convenient for him to go in and have a good meal. This was one of the greatest regrets of his life. Yu Qianqiu scratched his head, and the word waste was written all over his face after smelling the fragrance. Bowley and the others swallowed their saliva unabashedly. Guin, on the other hand, said weakly, Why don't we just forget it? I can still fill my stomach if I go to a cheaper place. He was still thinking about Yu Qianqiu, thinking that Yu Qianqiu did not have enough money. Little did he know that money was not a problem, but a problem of courage. Immortal Lord Crocodile squinted at Yu Qianqiu, his face full of mockery. Suddenly, his expression froze. He saw Yu Qianqiu's eyes shining. So he followed his gaze and saw that Yu Qianqiu was looking at the customers going in and out of the Heavenly Fragrance Restaurant. Immortal Lord Crocodile did not see anything and was about to ask him what he was looking at when he saw Yu Qianqiu laughing sinisterly. Wait for me here, I'll be right back. After saying that, he ran away. The few of them looked at each other, not knowing what he was up to. Just as Bowley and the others were waiting until their stomachs were growling, Immortal Lord Crocodile, who was looking around, suddenly paused. Someone sent a voice transmission to him. Old Monster, over here. Bring them over. Tilting his head to look, he saw Yu Qianqiu sneakily stretching his head out from the alley across the street, waving at him. He's over there, let's go over. Immortal Lord Crocodile called out to the few of them. When they saw Yu Qianqiu hiding in the alley, they were a little confused and walked over. After entering the alley, they found Yu Qianqiu standing in the shadows with his hands behind his back, smiling lewdly at them. What are you trying to do, kid? Immortal Lord Crocodile frowned. Yu Qianqiu cackled twice and took out his hand from behind his back. They saw that he was holding a few hats. He said proudly, It's very simple. How could it be a problem for me? Everyone, just put on your hats and keep your hair in. As he spoke, He handed out hats to everyone. The few of them held a hat in a daze. Boley and the others did not know why they had to wear hats. Immortal Lord Crocodile was simply impressed by Yu Qianzhou's appearance. It seemed that this guy had gone to get hats just now. They did not know if he had bought them or stolen them. The hat in his hand looked a little old from the looks of it. If you want to have a good meal at Heavenly Fragrance Restaurant, quickly put it on. As he spoke, Yu Qianzhou had already put on the hat. As he stuffed his braids, he asked Immortal Lord Crocodile, "Dainyu, help me see if I've stuffed it in. Why are you all in a daze? Quickly put it on. What are you waiting for? Don't you want to eat?" Immortal Lord Crocodile knew the reason for wearing hats, but Guin's face was full of fear. He thought of the terrible consequences of changing his appearance and eating without paying. Boley and the others could not figure out what eating had to do with wearing hats. However, under Yu Qianzhou's coercion, they put on the hats properly. TSK, TSK. This is a good idea. We can use it more in the future. Let's go and open up a path. Let's eat to our heart's content today. I have money. Yu Qianzhou waved his hand and swaggered out of the alley like a local tyrant. Immortal Lord Crocodile looked at the swaggering Yu Qianzhou and shook his head with a wry smile. He did not know whether to laugh or cry. He was completely convinced by this fellow. It was just eating. He would not starve to death even if he did not eat. Why did he have to put in so much effort? He was really unscrupulous to achieve his goals. The Heavenly Fragrant Restaurant was beautifully decorated and luxurious. The two ushers at the door led the 7 honored guests in a single file. Although the 2 greeters felt that the 7 distinguished guests did not look like rich people, and their hats did not match their clothes, they felt that the person in front of them was very confident when he walked. They did not dare to slight him and greeted him with a smile. As soon as they entered Heavenly Fragrance Restaurant, a graceful young lady greeted them. The high-end and elegant decorations were refreshing and could indeed shock the poor. However, Yu Qianzhou did not care at all. He was here to eat, not to look at their shabby decorations. Moreover, he was really rich and had seen a lot. Naturally, he would not be shocked. However, Boley and the others were a little dazed. They were used to living in nature and had never seen such a scene. Distinguished guests, do you have a reservation? The graceful young lady beside Yu Qianzhou asked with a graceful smile. I eat according to my mood. I eat when I feel like it. I never make a reservation. Yu Qianzhou glanced upstairs and thought that he would not feel at ease eating downstairs. So he waved his hand majestically and said, "Upstairs, give me the best private room and the best dishes." The smile on the young lady's face froze. She paused and squeezed out a smile again. "The upstairs is full. If you do not have a reservation, I can help you look downstairs." Hearing this, Yu Qianzhou did not have any temper. This was not the place for him to be unreasonable, so he could only nod and acquiesce. The young lady quickly found an empty table in the crowded lobby for them. It was near the stairs to the 2nd floor. Although the location was not good, it was better than no place at all. Anyway, they were here for the food, so they did not care. After sitting down, the young lady asked what they wanted to order. Yu Qianzhou only said one thing, until the table was full of the best dishes. As expected of the best restaurant in Lost City, the service efficiency was very high. In a short while, the table was filled with all the dishes. Other than Immortal Lord Crocodile and Guin, who still maintained their poise, everyone else at the table rolled up their sleeves and ate heartily. It seemed that they did not know if they would have the chance to come again after eating this time. Immortal Lord Crocodile was really cultured. After all, he was once one of the 12 great immortal lords in the celestial world. But Guin was not being gentlemanly. Instead, he looked at the table full of dishes with a frown. He was thinking about the terrible consequences if he did not have money to pay the bill later. The Heavenly Fragrance Restaurant had a very deep background. Ordinary people could not afford to offend them, let alone natives like them. Boley and the others were not nervous when faced with the food. They ate with their hands because they had never used chopsticks before. Yu Qianzhou pulled a piece of steak with both hands and bit into it. As he ate, he nodded at Immortal Lord Crocodile, indicating that it was delicious. He really did not expect that there would be such superb cooking in this sealed continent. The food here was so much better than outside. He even suspected that this was a culinary skill brought over from the celestial world. Little did he know that these people in besieged city were indeed very skilled in various industries, including cooking. Moreover, this was the best heavenly fragrance restaurant, so the taste was naturally not bad. The reason was simple. They were all trapped here, and there was not much they could do. All they could do was keep improving. All the customers in the lobby stared at the table of people eating, dumbfounded. They had never seen such a noble customer in such a high-class place like the Heavenly Fragrance Restaurant. "Uncle, you must help us catch him." "Uncle, that person is very easy to recognize. He is a skinny and short aboriginal, different from the other aborigines in the city." "Don't worry. Since he is such an obvious aboriginal, Uncle will definitely help you catch him." The two people who called him Uncle earlier were obviously children's voices, and the deep and loud voice behind them was obviously an adult's. The sound of a group of people walking down the stairs came from upstairs. Yu Qianshou and the others were at the table near the stairs, so they could clearly hear the voices of the people coming down. Yu Qianshou, who was biting into his steak, suddenly felt that the voices of the two children were a little familiar. He could not help but look up. He saw a burly middle-aged man in armor holding a child in each hand as he walked down the stairs. Behind him were 6 soldiers in the same armor, each with a sword at their waist. As for the two children, they were strange. One of their faces was swollen, and one of their eyes was so swollen that they could not open them. They only had one eye left to look downstairs. The two individuals' single eyes suddenly froze at the same time. Their gazes collided with Yu Qianshou's, unable to separate. Yu Qianshou was speechless, and he cursed in his heart. He could only blame himself for being soft-hearted. If he had known earlier, he would have killed these two unlucky children. These two children were none other than the two bad children whom he had abducted and slapped unconscious in the alley earlier in the day. He did not expect to meet them here. Immortal Crocodile's gaze paused on the two children's swollen faces. He then supported his head with one hand and rubbed his temples with his fingers. He sighed in his heart. What a talent. Chapter 752. The commotion came from the stairs at the side. Bowley and the others were not blockheads, so they naturally took a look. When they saw the two pig-headed children, they felt that they were familiar, but they didn't think of the two hateful children during the day. However, Gun had stayed in the city for so many years, and his mind was more flexible. From the situation at the scene, he vaguely guessed something, and his heart was beating wildly. He recognized the person who was holding the two children and seemed to be the leader. It was Shang Huan, one of the 4 commanders of the city guards. The result was as bad as the people who knew what was going on expected. The two children almost simultaneously pointed at Yu Qianshou, who was holding a steak, and screamed, "It's him! Uncle, it's him who hit us!" Shang Huan's sharp gaze suddenly stared at Yu Qianshou. He had already noticed some clues from the skin color of these people, so he sneered and said, "What a group of sinister and cunning natives. They actually know how to disguise themselves. It's obvious that they're people with ulterior motives. Capture all of them." As soon as he gave the order, the 6 soldiers behind him immediately jumped down from the stairs and unsheathed their swords, surrounding the 7 natives in disguise. Such a situation immediately caused a commotion in the lobby of Heavenly Fragrance Restaurant. Bowley and the others were simple but not stupid. At this moment, they naturally realized that the two children were the two bad children during the day. Everyone at the table stood up. Except for Yu Qianshou and Immortal Crocodile, everyone else had a terrified expression. Shang Huan slowly walked down from the stairs. The two children waved their fists beside him and shouted, "Beat them to death! Beat them to death!" The commotion in the lobby alerted the shopkeeper. A chubby middle-aged man quickly walked out from the back and asked in a deep voice from afar, "What's going on?" After seeing Shang Huan, he was slightly startled and frowned. "So, it's Commander Shang. Could it be that our Heavenly Fragrance Restaurant didn't treat us well and provoked Commander Shang to make a move here?" From the tone of his voice, it was obvious that he was someone with a background. Shang Huan glanced at him and slowly walked to Yu Qianqiu, pulling off Yu Qianqiu's hat. The braids on his head immediately exposed Yu Qianqiu's identity as a native. Shang Huan casually threw away his hat and fiercely elbowed Yu Qianqiu's chest. Although a mere mortal commander had some skills, it was not enough to injure Yu Qianqiu. However, it was enough to make Yu Qianqiu furious, but he forced himself to hold it in. He even pretended to groan and stagger, holding the table behind him. At this time, Shang Huan turned to the fat shopkeeper and said, "Shopkeeper is worrying too much. It's not that I want to cause trouble, but I just happened to find a group of natives who committed a crime in the city during the day, and I'm about to arrest them." As he spoke, he gave his subordinates a look, and the 6 subordinates quickly pulled off the hats of Boli and the others. The 7 native braids were exposed, and the lobby was filled with an uproar. The fat shopkeeper was slightly startled. Obviously, he didn't expect that there would be natives disguising themselves and eating in Heavenly Fragrance Restaurant. He paused and said, "Commander Shang, I don't care who they are, but the rule of my Heavenly Fragrance Restaurant is that anyone who comes here is a guest. You hit my guests in my Heavenly Fragrance Restaurant. How can I put my face?" "Great Commander, I will go and apologize. I won't damage your Heavenly Fragrance Restaurant's face," Shang Huan said indifferently, then turned to Yu Qianqiu and the others and said, "For the sake of Heavenly Fragrance Restaurant, I don't want to use force on you here, but you'd better obediently go back with me. That way, you'll suffer less. If you dare to resist arrest, you'll have to bear the consequences." Then, with a wave of his hand, the 6 armed soldiers immediately threatened them with their sabers. Yu Qianqiu and the other bandits were also quite cooperative, and they were obediently escorted out. As soon as they left Heavenly Fragrance Restaurant under the bright night sky, there was a commotion in the crowd, and it immediately attracted passers-by to ask what happened. No matter what the 7 people had done, the locals in the city all looked at them with disdain, as if they couldn't wait to capture all the natives in the city. Meanwhile, the warriors of the various races had bitter expressions, and they more or less felt sorry for them. Boli and the others were terrified, not knowing what the consequences of this matter would be. Immortal Crocodile's face, on the other hand, was gloomy. If it weren't for Yu Qianqiu, with his noble status, he wouldn't have to be paraded in public. Looking at Yu Qianqiu, whose head was lowered with his braids covering his face, he found that he had the potential to become a criminal. He couldn't help but sneer at him through telepathy. "Weren't you eating happily just now? Why are you so listless now? Cut the crap. You ate for free, so why are you still nagging?" Yu Qianqiu immediately retorted. Immortal Crocodile was speechless, regretting that he shouldn't have picked up his chopsticks. Lust City's public security had always been good, and it was rare to see such a scene. It was a night that had lost its passion day after day, but suddenly, because of the arrest of the 7 people, a large number of people pointed at them, as if they were watching a show. When they passed by a clothing store, the store's owner, Huang Tian, was also attracted by the commotion outside. He got up from the chair at the door, lifted his feet, and stood on the chair, watching from above the passers-by. When he saw that the 7 people who were arrested were Yu Qianqiu and the others, who he had given the clothes to, he couldn't help but be slightly stunned. What a coincidence! The 7 people were finally brought to the darkest corner in the west of the city, and there were no longer any spectators around. At the end of the road was a tall wall, and facing the intersection was an iron fence. The surroundings were quiet, and the atmosphere was somewhat oppressive. When the soldiers guarding the iron gate saw Shang Huan, they immediately saluted and opened the iron gate in the middle. Based on his experience, Yu Qianqiu judged that this should be Lust City's prison. Just as the crowd was about to enter the high wall, a soldier galloped over on horseback from behind, stopped in front of Shang Huan, and cupped his fists. "Commander Shang, the city lord has summoned you. He orders you to see him immediately." Shang Huan was slightly surprised, and after a pause, he nodded solemnly. Then he waved his hand to the soldiers and said, "Take them to the prison and wait for me to come and interrogate them personally tomorrow." The group obeyed, and the soldiers jumped down to invite him onto the horse. Shang Huan jumped onto the horse, turned around, and galloped away. Immortal Lord Crocodile looked at Yu Qianshou meaningfully, because just when Shang Huan turned around, he saw with his own eyes Yu Qianshou cut his fingertip and flicked a small drop of blood on his Shang Huan's back. He didn't know what trick this guy was playing. As soon as the 7 people entered the wall, they were immediately taken to the dungeon. After passing through a dark and damp tunnel, they were all chased into a dark underground stone room. The iron gate behind them clanked, and even the dim light in the tunnel disappeared. Now, they really couldn't see their own fingers in front of them. The underground stone room had a moldy smell, and they didn't know how long it had been since someone had been locked up. Bowley and the others couldn't see their surroundings clearly and squeezed together in fear. They wanted to cry, but no tears came out. They had never experienced what it was like to be in prison. "Are you satisfied now?" Immortal Lord Crocodile's voice echoed in the stone room. "Of course. Guin's place is too small, and I was worried about not having a place to stay at night. Sigh, I can eat and sleep for free and live a good life." Yu Qianshou chuckled. Although the stone room was dark, with their cultivation, they had no problem seeing each other clearly within a short distance. His teasing laughter made Bowley and the others, who had been trembling with fear, relax a little. Bowley blankly looked around in the darkness and asked, "Yu Qianshou, you hit? Can we still go out? Won't it implicate our people?" "Don't worry. It's okay. We'll be fine, and they'll let us go." Yu Qianshou comforted him. These words made Bowley and the others feel more at ease, but Guin's face was bitter. He knew that it wouldn't be that simple. The stone room was empty, and the ground was damp. There wasn't even a place to sit. The others didn't see it, but Immortal Lord Crocodile did. Yu Qianshou took out a large pile of dried straw and laid it on the ground. He then lay down and said to Bowley and the others, who didn't dare to move, with a smile, "Bowley, don't be nervous. Just walk forward. There's a place for you to sit." Bowley and the others had also heard the sound of him tossing the straw. They walked forward slowly, and when their feet touched the straw, they slowly squatted down and tried to feel it with their hands before sitting down. Once they sat down firmly, they felt more at ease. Immortal Lord Crocodile was stunned and speechless for a while. He then walked to Yu Qianshou and sat down beside him. He transmitted his voice suspiciously. "You brat, you still have straw with you?" He couldn't believe that someone would actually have straw in their storage bag. It was simply unimaginable. "You don't understand. This is called being prepared." Yu Qianshou rested his head on his arms and crossed his legs, looking relaxed. In fact, these straws were casually gathered from the farmland in Utopia. "What are you trying to do, brat?" Immortal Lord Crocodile asked. He didn't think that this fellow was someone who would obediently surrender. Sure enough, Yu Qianshou sneered and replied, "You dare to hit me? Wait and see." This was destined to be a sleepless night for the few of them. Although no one spoke, no one could fall asleep. It was late at night, and it was quiet outside. Only the sound of a few people tossing and turning on the straw could be heard. Yu Qianshou quietly got up and placed a few silver balls on the ground. Then he waved goodbye to Immortal Lord Crocodile, who was staring at him with wide eyes, and instantly disappeared. When he reappeared, Yu Qianshou was dressed in black and his face was covered. He didn't know where he was. Under the hazy moonlight, he only knew that he was in a garden, surrounded by pavilions that were low-key and luxurious. It was obviously not the residence of an ordinary person. He guessed that this should be Commander Shang's home. The reason why he stayed up until midnight was to wait for the commander to return home to teach him a lesson. He didn't hit him for nothing. Yu Qianshou hid in a patch of flowers and secretly poked his head out to look around. He happened to see a person walking out of the pavilion not far away. It was none other than Commander Shang. Yu Qianshou raised his eyebrows. Without saying a word, a flying sword shot out with a whoosh. Shang Huan saw a cold light, and before he could react, his head was separated from his body. The remaining body and the flying head fell to the ground at the same time. "Who is it?" A loud shout came from the pavilion. Yu Qianshou's vision blurred, and a figure suddenly appeared in front of him. Yu Qianshou, who was about to slip away, was slightly shocked when he saw who it was. This person was none other than the clothing store owner, Huang Tian, who had given him clothes for free on the streets previously. Chapter 753. It's you. Huang Tian slowly raised a black cloth in his hand and sneered. I've always felt there was something wrong with a native like you. So you're a cultivator. Damn, he can recognize me even with my face covered? Yu Qianqiu felt the black cloth in his hand was familiar. He subconsciously touched his face and found that the black cloth covering his face was gone. He immediately sucked in a breath of cold air. The black cloth in the opponent's hand was clearly his mask. He didn't even know when the opponent took it away. If the opponent wanted to kill him just now, Yu Qianqiu immediately broke out in a cold sweat. He didn't dare to think any further. He knew his actions today were too rash. The cultivators of the celestial world had an undeserved reputation. They weren't people he could deal with. With this scare, he completely calmed down. His experience of 2 lifetimes of being fearless in the face of danger came into play at this crucial moment. He wasn't in a hurry to leave now, since the opponent didn't kill him just now. If he was in the opponent's shoes, he would definitely want to know the assassin's background, so his life wasn't in danger for now. Also, since he had already revealed his face, if he ran away, he wouldn't be able to establish himself in Lust Soil City. Then all his efforts would be wasted. Huang Tian, aren't you selling clothes? Why are you here? Yu Qianqiu asked in shock. Just as he finished speaking, there were already many footsteps running over, clearly attracted by the commotion here. Huang Tian's gaze flickered as he stared at Yu Qianqiu. He suddenly shouted, "All of you back down." His voice shook the surroundings. People immediately replied, "Yes, City Lord." The dense footsteps retreated. "City Lord?" Yu Qianqiu's pupils shrank and his gaze turned cold. "Your Lust Soil City's City Lord?" Although it was an unintentional question, it was no different from asking the obvious. Huang Tian glanced at Shang Huan's corpse on the ground and let go of the black cloth in his hand. He said expressionlessly, "You're not a tribe native, nor a celestial cultivator, but a human cultivator. Just who are you?" Yu Qianqiu immediately gave him a thumbs up. City Lord Huang has good eyesight. "That's right. I'm a human cultivator." Huang Tian narrowed his eyes and said in a deep voice, "Human cultivators? There's no place for cultivators in the mortal world on this continent. So, you came in from the outside world when the heaven and earth grand formation was opened?" "Yes and no." Yu Qianqiu gave an ambiguous answer. Huang Tian's eyes suddenly narrowed, and he said in a low voice, "A mere cultivator of the mortal world has quite the guts to actually barge into the city governor's estate to kill someone. Could it be that you're not afraid of death? This is the city lord's mansion?" Yu Qianqiu looked around and felt a little depressed. He had purposely waited until late at night because he wanted to wait for Shang Huan to return home so that he could make his move. He didn't expect Shang Huan to stay until now. His judgment was wrong. If I knew this was the city lord's mansion, I wouldn't have come. Yu Qianqiu shook his head and smiled bitterly. Huang Tian snorted coldly and didn't ask why he killed Shang Huan. He waved his sleeve, and the ground under his feet surged like waves. A few huge mud palms suddenly stretched out of the ground and hugged Shang Huan's body, swallowing it into the ground. Then, the ground returned to normal, and not even a trace of blood could be seen. What kind of spell was this? Yu Qianqiu was stunned. Huang Tian turned to leave, and as he walked, he said, "Follow me. Don't think about escaping, or else you'll end up like Shang Huan's body." Yu Qianqiu consciously nodded and followed Huang Tian. When he passed by the place where Shang Huan was buried, it still felt a little surreal. He couldn't help but step on the ground to make sure it was solid. Huang Tian, who was walking in front, couldn't help but twitch. It seemed that this kid really wasn't afraid. Walking to a remote part of the garden, Yu Qianqiu, who was following behind, suddenly found that the ground in front of him was empty, and there was suddenly a big black hole. Huang Tian walked in neither too fast nor too slow. Yu Qianqiu was stunned again as he stood at the entrance of the cave. He saw that the soil in the cave was constantly retracting as the yellow sky moved forward, forming a 3-meter-wide cave. The depth of the cave continued to extend underground. This scene was simply too magical. Huang Tian seemed to be the ruler of the earth. Wherever he went, the earth had to make way. Just as Yu Qianqiu was in a daze, he suddenly realized that his center of gravity was a little unstable. The ground beneath his feet seemed to be moving, and he was shocked when he looked around. It was as if he was standing on the conveyor belt of an elevator, bringing him deep underground. The soil behind him suddenly closed, and the starry sky suddenly disappeared. He had been buried alive in the soil. Huang Tian, what are you trying to do? Yu Qianqiu said warily. He could barely see Huang Tian's figure in the darkness. Don't be afraid. If I wanted to kill you, I would have done it long ago. There's no need to go through so much trouble. Don't worry, follow me. I have something to ask you, Huang Tian said calmly as he continued going deeper. This consolation did not make Yu Qianqiu let his guard down. In just a short while, he estimated that he had already gone more than 100 meters deep. Yu Qianqiu tried to communicate with Utopia and realized that there was no obstruction. He immediately heaved a sigh of relief and said, "If you have something to ask me, why don't you ask me where I am? Why do you have to go deep underground?" I naturally have secrets to ask when I go deep underground. Huang Tian, who was advancing forward, stopped and suddenly waved his hand to scatter a large number of fluorescent stones. The surrounding terrain instantly changed, retreating with the fluorescent stones and expanding the underground space, changing into various shapes. Yu Qianqiu was already attracted by this magical spell. When he realized that the ground that was bringing him forward had stopped, his vision suddenly opened up. He saw that an underground palace had formed in just a short while. It was an earthen yellow underground palace. Under the illumination of the fluorescent stones embedded in the surroundings, the entire underground palace could be seen. There were earthen yellow stairs, various earthen yellow sculptures, and earthen yellow tables and chairs. Huang Tian was sitting behind a table in front of him. He pointed at the chair next to him and said with a faint smile, "There's no need to look anymore. Come and sit. I have something to ask you." Yu Qianqiu wasn't in a hurry to reply. He strolled around the palace, knocked on it, and touched it. He noticed that everything was lifelike as if it was made by the heavens, and he couldn't help but click his tongue in admiration. After satisfying his curiosity, he walked over with large strides and sat opposite of Huang Tian before clapping and praising. As expected of an immortal from the immortal dimension, your methods are truly miraculous. Huang Tian smiled and said, "It's just a small trick. It's just that you haven't seen it before. It's just that I'm proficient in the earth elemental arts. There's nothing magical about it." As he spoke, he took out 2 sets of wine utensils from his storage bracelet and placed them on the table. 2 earthen yellow hands immediately stretched out from the table. If it wasn't for the difference in color, their lifelike appearance could be passed off as genuine. One of the 2 hands took out a cup and the other a pot, and moved in front of Yu Qianqiu to pour wine. After filling up the wine cup was placed in front of Yu Qianqiu. The 2 earthen yellow hands disappeared into the table. The wine utensils in front of Huang Tian were the same. Chapter 754. Yu Qianqiu stared at the wine cup in front of him in a daze. Huang Tian smiled faintly, thinking that Yu Qianqiu had been intimidated by his earth control technique. Little did he know that Yu Qianqiu's little heart was trembling when he heard the words earth element. In a split second, a deep night sky star map became incomparably clear in his mind, and his heart surged in an instant. Although it's not the wine of the immortal world, it's still a fine wine of the mortal world. There's no poison in it, so try it. Huang Tian's words pulled Yu Qianqiu back from his daze. Yu Qianqiu's eyebrows moved slightly, and a trace of disdain flashed through his eyes. He picked up the wine cup without hesitation and drained it in one gulp. So what if there was poison in it? Yu Qianqiu didn't believe that it could be more poisonous than the soul-dispelling smoke. He wasn't even afraid of the soul-dispelling smoke. So why would he be afraid of a small cup of poison wine? Good wine. Yu Qianqiu smacked his lips and praised. Just as he put down the wine cup, he saw a hand reach out from the table and help him fill up the wine. Then, the hand disappeared from the table again. Yu Qianqiu resisted the urge to grab that hand and touch it. He looked around and asked curiously, "The underground palace is all earthy yellow. Is it because of the soil?" "That's right." Huang Tian stroked his beard and smiled. "When I was sent here to take care of affairs, I was tempted to build Yellow Soil City because I saw the large yellow soil plains here." Yu Qianqiu's heart stirred and he asked again, "City Lord Huang is proficient in the earth element technique, but you're interested in this place. Is there some difference between yellow soil and normal soil?" Huang Tian nodded and smiled. "It's rare to see people care about this." "That's right. For those who cultivated the earth manipulation technique, although they could control any kind of soil, for beginners, yellow soil was the easiest soil for them to learn and familiarize themselves with. For example, black soil and red soil were much weaker in terms of affinity. Also, yellow soil is more powerful for those who cultivate the earth control technique. The rarest thing is that the yellow soil here is very pure, with almost no other types of mixed soil. Coupled with the existence of such a large area, I was tempted to build a city." Yu Qianqiu had a thoughtful expression on his face. He vaguely remembered that he had read about the 5 elements in a book in his previous life. Metal, wood, water, fire, and earth each represented the 5 directions of west, east, north, south, and central, and each corresponded to the 5 colors of white, green, black, red, and yellow. He had already practiced the 3 magic arts of metal, water, and fire. It was precisely by relying on the understanding of the north, west, and south star maps that he comprehended at the same time that he simultaneously practiced these 3 magic arts. His body also produced 3 crystals of white, black, and red, which were astonishingly consistent with the records of the 5 elements in the books of his previous life. In that case, he was certain that he was still lacking the cyan wood element of the Eastern Star Chart and the yellow earth element of the Western Star Chart. Now, coupled with what Huang Tian had said about the yellow soil being beneficial for cultivating the earth control technique, didn't that mean that the best time for him to cultivate the earth formula had arrived in this yellow soil plain? Thinking back to the night sky star map that had suddenly flashed in his mind, Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but become excited. The 5-star maps had already been deeply imprinted in his mind. There was no mistake. The star map that had involuntarily flashed in his mind was the Eastern Star Map, the position of the Earth Formula's star map. His previous cultivation experience of the 3 5 elements magic arts told him that the 5 elements magic arts couldn't be forced. Every time he was attracted by the same element, the corresponding star map would automatically flash in his mind. At the same time, this also meant that the opportunity to cultivate the 5 elements magic arts had arrived. How could he not be excited? He deeply felt that even if he didn't find the purple fire in the Eastern Holy Land, it wouldn't be a wasted trip. If he hadn't deduced wrongly, once he successfully cultivated the Earth Formula, his cultivation would break through to the soul formation stage. Seeing that he hadn't come back to his senses after a while, Huang Tian asked suspiciously, "Could it be that you're also interested in cultivating the earth control technique?" "Hee, that's not it. I just suspect that City Lord Huang's surname is Huang, so that's why I like the yellow soil," Yu Qianqiu casually said. This kind of nonsense was something he could easily come up with. What kind of logic was this? Huang Tian was stunned. He smiled and said, "It's true that my surname is Huang, but I still don't know little brother's surname and name. My name is Yu Qianqiu." After Yu Qianqiu returned to his senses, he asked, "I wonder what secret city Lord Huang wants to ask me by bringing me underground? It can't be that you only want to ask my name, right?" Huang Tian stared at Yu Qianqiu with a smile for a while before he slowly said, "Although I don't know why I can't see through your cultivation, judging from your reaction when I attacked earlier. If I'm not wrong, your cultivation shouldn't be at the soul formation stage. Am I right?" Huang Tian smiled and looked at Yu Qianqiu for a while before he slowly said, "Although I don't know why I can't see through your cultivation, but judging from your reaction when I attacked. If I'm not wrong, your cultivation shouldn't be at the soul formation stage. Am I right?" Huang Tian nodded. "I've guarded this place for many years, so I know a little more than others. That is, if your cultivation hasn't reached the soul formation late stage, even if the East Holy Land opens, you won't be able to enter through the entrance. If you force your way in, you'll definitely be crushed into dust by the power of the heaven and earth formation. Then I believe that a human cultivator like you has another way to enter the East Holy Land. Am I right? Hearing this, Yu Qianzhou's heart shook. He didn't expect this to be a flaw. He narrowed his eyes and said, "So what if I'm right? So what if I'm wrong? Looks like I guessed right. You do have another way to enter the East Holy Land." Hee. I didn't expect to encounter it. Huang Tian finished the wine in front of him in one gulp. He put down the wine cup and took a deep breath. It was clear that he was trying his best to calm his agitated emotions. His fingers knocked on the table firmly and said, "This is the reason why I brought you underground. The secret I want to ask is for you to tell me how to leave this East Holy Land." Yu Qianzhou looked around and said with a cold smile, "If I don't tell you, are you going to imprison me here? You can understand it that way." Huang Tian said indifferently, "But this isn't the most important reason. I'm afraid that the walls have ears outside. How can such an important secret fall into the ears of others? Could it be that you want to keep this secret to yourself?" Yu Qianzhou put on a fake smile and said, "Don't you want to tell this secret to the immortal monarchs of the East and West palaces? Wouldn't that be a great merit?" "A great merit? Ha!" Huang Tian laughed loudly. No one knew what he was laughing about, but there was some bitterness hidden in his laughter. After laughing, he shook his head and said, "This isn't something you should be concerned about. You just need to tell me the secret." Yu Qianzhou said with an "Oh, why do I feel that once I tell the secret, it'll be my death day? Because you don't want a second person to know this secret. Do you have a choice?" Huang Tian said indifferently, "I don't have a choice, but what I want to tell you is that there is actually no secret because I don't know how I got in here." Yu Qianzhou sneered and said, "Are you satisfied with this answer?" Huang Tian's expression turned cold. He stood up and said, "Yu Qianzhou, don't refuse a toast only to drink a forfeit." Yu Qianzhou also stood up slowly and said, "Either way, I will die if I don't tell you. If I don't tell you, I might live a little longer. You can do whatever you want." The reason why he was so stubborn was that he was prepared to leave at any moment. After all, the other party would not kill him before the secret was revealed. Unexpectedly, Huang Tian snorted coldly and raised his hand to form a claw above the table. In the blink of an eye, a ball of earth appeared on the table, and a wisp of golden fog was injected from his palm. After doing all this, Huang Tian turned around with his hands behind his back. As he walked, he said, "It seems like you still need some time to think about it. Once you've figured out how to break the ball of earth on the table, I'll be happy to listen to your secret. But remember, my patience is limited. Don't make me use extreme measures to force you. Don't think about escaping. This place is more than enough to trap you." A hole appeared in the wall in front of him. As he walked out, the wall quickly healed seamlessly. Yu Qianzhou was stunned. He thought that the other party was going to torture him, but he did not expect him to be so gentle. Did he really think that he couldn't escape from this underground palace? He contacted Utopia again and realized that it was still unobstructed. He immediately relaxed. He thought to himself that Huang Tian was underestimating him too much. He looked around and walked to the spot where Huang Tian had disappeared. He waved his hand and slapped the wall heavily. The impact caused his arm to feel a little numb, but it did not leave a single mark. The wall was actually as hard as iron. He then took out the green fire flying sword to test it out. In the end, it easily stabbed in with a pft. It was not as hard as he had imagined. However, the moment the flying sword was pulled out, the wall seemed to be alive. It was soft and hard, and it quickly recovered to its original state. Yu Qianzhou faced the wall speechlessly. It was easy to stab the sword in, but with his cultivation, if he were to fall in, he would probably be crushed to death by the immense pressure from the surroundings. It was no wonder that Huang Tian thought that he could not escape. Tisk! Yu Qianzhou waved his hand in disdain and put away the green fire flying sword. He casually threw a small silver ball to the corner and disappeared from the underground palace. On the surface, after Huang Tian came out, he slowly walked to the pavilion in the garden. He stood with his hands behind his back as if he was waiting for something. Not long after, a stream of light suddenly shot over from the horizon. A black-clothed man appeared in the garden. When he saw Huang Tian in the pavilion, he immediately bowed and said, "Greetings, City Lord Huang." Huang Tian laughed out loud and cupped his hands. "Brother Yufeng is an envoy of the Celestial City. How can you greet a small border official like me? I have already prepared good wine and delicacies for you. Please." "I dare not," the black-clothed man said politely and walked side by side with Huang Tian to the brightly lit pavilion. If Yu Qianshou saw this scene, he would know that it was not that Huang Tian was gentle and did not torture him, but that he had something to do and did not have time to tangle with him for the time being. In the dungeon west of the city, Yu Qianshou appeared again. The moment Immortal Lord Crocodile saw him, he immediately transmitted his voice. "Where did you go, kid?" Yu Qianshou glanced at Boli and the others who were still tossing and turning on the pile of hay and transmitted his voice. "I've already killed that bastard Shanghuan, but who would have thought that I would run in a lust city lord? Do you know who he is? It's that old man Huang Tian who gave us clothes for free. I almost suffered a great loss at his hands." "You escaped from him?" Immortal Lord Crocodile looked at Yu Qianshou in shock. "Nonsense. If I didn't escape, would I still be here talking to you?" Yu Qianshou said impatiently. "I came to tell you the truth. I have something to do and will be leaving for a period of time. I don't know when I'll be back, but it won't take too long. You guys can stay here for a while. This is for them to eat and drink. It should be enough until I return." A storage bag was thrown to Immortal Lord Crocodile. Chapter 755. What did he mean by uncertain return date? What did he mean by temporarily suffering here? Immortal Crocodile was a little dumbfounded. Before he could say anything, Yu Qianshou had already disappeared. He quickly checked the contents of his storage bag, only to find that the contents were enough for Boli and the rest to eat for more than a month. Looking at the pitch-black prison, he suddenly felt his scalp go numb. This kid wouldn't let us stay here for a month, would he? The night breeze was cool, and there was no one on the lust plain. Occasionally, a few mice would jump around under the hazy moonlight. Yu Qianshou's sudden appearance immediately frightened the group of mice, and they quickly scurried into the nearby holes. After carefully observing his surroundings, Yu Qianshou's body leaped into the air lightly and landed in a ditch tens of meters behind him. When he had passed by this place on horseback, he had thrown a small silver ball here, just in case. He did not expect it to really come in handy. However, the surrounding terrain was too open, and the ditch was only a few meters deep. He did not know how long he would be staying here. He could not possibly just sit here and cultivate, right? It was still barely passable at night, but if it was during the day, he would be easily discovered by passers-by. His eyes suddenly landed on a mouse that happened to pop its head out of a hole to take a look. His eyes immediately lit up, and he scurried back and forth in the ditch that was hundreds of meters long before he found a sidewall that had caved in. With a flick of his sleeves, 6 black flame flying swords flashed out and formed a drill that rapidly drilled into the ground, causing dust to rise for safety reasons. He dug a tunnel that was more than 30 meters deep into the ground. Most of the crushed soil was sent into Utopia, and the rest was used to seal the entrance of the hole. At the end of the tunnel was a round nest with a diameter of 2 meters, which was enough for him to meditate and cultivate. Waha! Looking at his masterpiece, Yu Qianshou could not help but dance and laugh wildly. He rubbed his hands together excitedly, sat down cross-legged, and slowly closed his eyes. Just as he silently memorized the middle-level star map in his mind, the vital energy in his body began to fluctuate uneasily. Yu Qianshou was so excited that he was trembling slightly. If he remembered correctly, this was the same feeling he had when he was comprehending the gold art. It was as if there was a similar attribute around him that was attracting him. Because he was too excited, he actually couldn't get into the zone for a long time. He knew that there was a problem with his mentality. If he continued like this, he didn't know when he would be able to comprehend the cultivation method from the complicated star chart. This was a very complicated project, so he had to adjust his mentality. He immediately steadied his breathing and cleared away the excitement in his mind bit by bit. After a long time, the distracting thoughts in his mind were gradually discarded, and his mind entered a state of selflessness. The expression on his face relaxed, and he became expressionless. In his closed eyes, there was only the pitch-black night sky, full of twinkling stars, as if they were guiding him to find the secrets hidden within the endless stars. Amidst the tranquility and emptiness of his thoughts, the middle-ranked star map that he had memorized by heart began to flip through the pages every night. In a vast starry sky, there were fixed constellations in the sky every night, as well as stars that were constantly changing positions. In the instant that the star map alternated every night, his entire body entered a wonderful state. It was as if there was nothing in the world, and there was nothing in his heart. There was only himself, the sun, the moon, and the stars, and he was swimming in the sea of stars. The trajectories of the stars' changes gradually became clear in his mind, and his brain quickly calculated the changes of every star on the middle-level star map. With such complicated changes of the stars, if he didn't enter a state of selflessness and abandon all distracting thoughts, how could he experience the changes of every star? His mind was dead silent. When the star map overlapped each other every night, the trajectories of the stars' changes gradually became traceable. Those fixed stars in the starry sky transformed into bones, flesh, and meridians in his mind. Those moving and changing stars gradually formed the trajectories of his true essence. With the traceable trajectories, it was like spinning silk from a cocoon, and all the problems were easily solved. The calculations in Yu Qianshou's mind became smoother and faster. The traceable trajectories of the star map expanded little by little, becoming clearer and clearer, and gradually becoming more complete. When he had completely mastered it, the trajectories of the stars in his mind were all connected together, like a constellation that was connected by strokes. After the other insignificant stars suddenly flashed, they seemed to have completed their mission with a faint smile and retired into the vast night sky. In the universe, only the summarized trajectories were circulating. In the cave, Yu Qianshou sat cross-legged with his back against Mother Earth, as if he was eternally sitting cross-legged. His mind was completely integrated into the universe's vault of heaven, and he was neither happy nor sad. The true essence in his body had already begun to imitate the perfect trajectory of his martial arts. In the instant that he completed one circulation, all the pores on his body opened up. Only in this pitch-black cave could one see that his entire body was emitting an earthy yellow light. In the instant that the light could be seen, it shot into the surrounding soil layer and disappeared. It was also at this moment that the earth seemed to be summoned. In the deathly still cave, a dense life force gradually appeared, as thin and hazy as fog. This was a mist formed by the gathering of yellow fairies that were difficult to see with the naked eye. They were indistinct and unfathomable, singing joyous songs and jumping about. Fairies that had not appeared for billions of years. Since ancient times, we have been sleeping in the embrace of Mother Earth. If not for the boundless universe's summons, we would have always existed with Mother Earth. Everything on the earth, because of our support, is able to grow and multiply endlessly. Even if the heavens and earth collapse and the stars no longer exist, we can still turn into tiny specks of dust and wander in the vast universe, never to be born or destroyed. As long as there is a place where we exist, there will always be a day when a new celestial body is born. We represent eternity. The hazy mist that was summoned from the cave became thicker and thicker, but it still lingered around Yu Qianshou's body and refused to approach. It seemed that there were still doubts about this monster, Yu Qianshou. Could it be that he was really representing the universe to summon us? They were deeply doubtful. When a wisp of mist tried to approach Yu Qianshou, it was quickly absorbed into Yu Qianshou's body, and there was no abnormal reaction. This proved to the other fairies that it was indeed Yu Qianshou who was summoning them. Yu Qianshou was like Mother Earth and could completely rely on them. All the doubts in the cave were gone. In an instant, the mist in the cave rushed madly towards Yuchincho. It drilled into every pore of his body, looking for the home that belonged to it after it woke up. Once it was chosen, it would continue to advance without any regrets and accompany him for life. When a surging yellow stream began to appear in his meridians, a knowing smile appeared on Yuchincho's face. He knew that he had succeeded. He had successfully cultivated the earth formula of the 5 elements magic arts. After confirming that there was no mistake in his understanding of the earth formula, Yuchincho quickly increased the speed of the magic arts, striving to reach the level of proficiency as soon as possible. The speed of the magic arts became faster and more proficient. The majestic yellow stream finally converged into a river in his meridians and converged towards Yuchincho's central dantian. In the instant that the yellow stream rushed into his dantian, the body of the little boy, who had been sitting cross-legged and cultivating by himself, suddenly blossomed with a dazzling golden light and disappeared in a flash. The little boy suddenly opened his black and white eyes, which were full of spiritual energy, revealing a look of pleasant surprise. The red, black, and white crystals that were circling around his body also suddenly increased the speed of their circulation. It seemed that they were also very excited. The yellow stream gradually filled his entire dantian. The little boy suddenly opened his mouth, and using both his mouth and nose, he sucked in big mouthfuls of the yellow fog into his stomach. He kept sucking and kept sucking until his stomach was slightly bloated. Only then did he burp, choking out a few wisps of yellow smoke, and stop absorbing the yellow fog. Then, the little boy slowly closed his eyes, as if he was digesting the food. Seeing that there was no one else to receive them, the yellow fog that had continuously flowed into Yuchincho's body, starting from the walls of his dantian and seeping into his limbs and bones, looking for its own home in every cell. Only when the earth element had filled every cell did Yuchincho stop the circulation of the earth formula. He slowly exhaled, opened his eyes, and excitedly waved his fists. Then, as if he had thought of something, he paused for a moment, then immediately closed his eyes and began to examine the movements in his dantian. According to his experience with the other 3 magic arts, after mastering the earth formula, he should have a breakthrough in his cultivation. The little boy's bloated stomach slowly sank, and when it became flat again, the little boy suddenly opened his eyes, opened his mouth, and spat out a yellow crystal bead. The crystal bead was like a living creature, happily flying around in his dantian. The little boy looked at it with a smile, and suddenly his small hand gently waved at the yellow crystal bead, and the yellow crystal bead obediently fell into his palm. The little boy twirled the crystal bead and looked at the other 3 beads that were circling around him. No one knew what he said, but the 3 beads immediately stopped revolving. The little boy placed the yellow crystal bead between them and adjusted the distance between the 4 beads evenly. After he chuckled, the red, black, white, and yellow crystal beads began to revolve at a uniform speed. The little boy slowly closed his eyes, and his chest suddenly expanded as he sucked in a mouthful of true essence from his dantian. The speed at which the 4 crystal beads revolved increased, once again turning the true essence in his dantian into a tornado. The resulting strong suction force was like the eye of a tornado, sucking all the true essence in Yuchincho's body back into his dantian. This feeling of true essence flowing in reverse caused cold sweat to appear on Yuchincho's forehead. However, he was in pain and happy at the same time, for he knew what this meant. He was no longer the newbie he was when he first started cultivating the 5 elemental secret arts. He knew what he needed the most right now: spiritual energy, a large amount of spiritual energy. What the current Yuchincho lacked the least was spirit stones. In a flurry, he took out 2 big handfuls of glowing black divine grade spirit stones. Cold sweat dripped down his forehead as his face contorted into a grimace. Both of his hands gripped the divine grade spirit stones, madly absorbing the majestic spiritual energy contained within. There was nothing he could do about it. The nascent soul in his dantian was sucking his true essence, and he could only absorb the spiritual energy from the spirit stones to replenish his meridians. Otherwise, he would die from the pain. Chapter 756. No matter how the ruler treated the people, Baiwan was at least a country without foreign aggression. The people's lives were not too difficult. The reason for this was that ancestor Wanlanfeng was behind it, so no one dared to attack Baiwan for the time being. Of course, ordinary people didn't know who Wanlanfeng was. Only a few high-ranking officials of Baiwan nation knew who he was. However, because of the death of Baiwan's emperor, the whole country seemed to be in deep mourning, with white mourning everywhere. Although the emperor had passed away, the country still needed a successor. Thus, Crown Prince Wenhao naturally inherited the throne and became the new emperor of Baiwan. Outside the filial bedchamber, white banners covered the sky and the earth, and mournful wails could be heard everywhere. The coffin of the late emperor was in the center of the palace. The new emperor, Wenhao, and his mother knelt on 3 soft cushions below. The last one was empty, and no one knew who it was for. Behind him was a group of the late emperor's concubines, each of them wearing mourning clothes and weeping. Whether or not they really missed the late emperor, their grief was real. With the late emperor gone, they who often competed with the empress for favor might not have a good life in the future. The day of the new emperor's reckoning was not far away. The eyes of the former empress, now the empress dowager, were red and swollen. She glanced at the empty cushion to the left of the emperor from time to time, unable to hide the anger in her expression. In addition, she had knelt for so long that she was about to fall. Emperor Wenhao reacted quickly and supported her. He asked anxiously, "Mother, are you tired?" The eunuch of the Department of Rites did not dare to be negligent and hurried over to help. "The Empress Dowager is not feeling well. Your servant will help her to rest for a while." The Empress Dowager stubbornly pushed the two away and stared at the empty cushion on the left. She said angrily, "Where is China?" On this mourning day for her father, does she still not change her playful nature? The emperor immediately gave the eunuch a look. The eunuch understood that the new emperor was protecting his sister and did not want the Empress Dowager to hurt her health. He said with a sorrowful face, "Due to the death of the late emperor, the princess is too sad and hurt her body. It is inconvenient for her to kneel for a long time, so she is staying in the Green Scent Palace to observe mourning. She is not as playful as you think." When the Empress Dowager heard this, the anger on her face gradually disappeared and was replaced by a trace of worry. The emperor immediately said to the eunuch of the Department of Rites, "Go and see how the princess is. Don't let anything happen to her." "Yes." The eunuch hurriedly retreated in fear and trepidation. Inside Wenqing Palace, the guards and palace maids all performed their duties with white filial piety. In the princess's bedroom, white mourning clothes were thrown on the ground, as well as women's undergarments. Panting and moaning could be heard coming from the brocade mattress on the side. A man and a woman were naked together. The man was carrying 2 smooth legs and was violently pounding them as if he was madly venting. The sound of slapping echoed in the entire dormitory. After the deed, the man heaved a sigh of relief and slowly fell to the side. A head of silky black hair slid to the side of the pillow, revealing its true appearance. It was none other than Yan Juexing. The woman whose face was flushed red after her orgasm was the princess of Baiwan Nation, Wenqing. Wenqing, whose cheeks were still flushed, suddenly burst into tears. She threw herself onto Yan Juexing's body and punched his chest forcefully with her delicate fists. Yan Juexing's eyes were indifferent as he allowed her to hit him with all her might. Her waving fists gradually lost strength. Wenqing buried her head in Yan Juexing's chest and wailed at the top of her lungs, "You're not human, you're not human. I'm a bad woman. I'm an unfilial daughter. How could I do this to you at a time like this?" During the pleasure in bed, she felt extremely comfortable because of the orgasm, but after waking up from it, she blamed herself deeply and felt extremely conflicted. Outside Wenqing Palace, the eunuch of the Department of Rites had just arrived when he faintly heard Wenqing's heart-wrenching cries. He couldn't help but sigh in relief. He thought to himself, this is indeed the deep love between father and daughter. No wonder she was the most beloved daughter of the late emperor. This is a cry that comes from the bottom of her heart. Just as he was about to step through the gates of Wenqing Palace, the guard at the gates suddenly waved his arm to stop him. The eunuch of the Department of Rites was startled and immediately shouted, I'm here on the orders of the new emperor to visit the princess. Back off. He thought he could scare him off, but the other side said expressionlessly, the princess is too sad and doesn't want to see anyone. Eunuch, please go back. How dare you? You dare to disobey the emperor's orders. The eunuch of the Department of Rites was furious. He had the emperor's orders, but someone dared to stop him. However, the other party was truly bold. With a clang, a long knife was unsheathed and a cold light flashed in front of the gates. The guard said in a low voice, the princess's orders. Anyone who trespasses will be killed without mercy. The eunuch of the Department of Rites was so frightened by the blade that he took a few steps back. He pointed at the guard and said, you, for a long time. He really couldn't understand. Could it be that this guard's head had been kicked by a donkey? Could it be that he couldn't distinguish between the princess and the emperor's orders? In the end, he had no choice but to leave with a flick of his sleeve. Yan Juexing, who was lying on the bed, heard everything clearly. The guards and servants of Wenqing Palace were all controlled by his demonic eyes. He had nothing to worry about. Seeing that the matter was over, his cold eyes stared at the hipster who was crying on top of him. He waved his arm and pushed her to the side of the bed, wanting to get up. The still crying hipster was slightly startled. As if she had woken up from a dream, her naked body jumped up and knelt on the brocade couch. She hugged Yan Juexing tightly. Yan Juexing turned around indifferently and said, Didn't you say that I'm not a human? Why are you still hugging me? The hipster paused. Then, with red eyes, she shook her head desperately and said, I was wrong. I won't scold you anymore. Where are you going? Where I go has nothing to do with you. Let go. Yan Juexing said indifferently. I won't let go. The hipster hugged him even tighter. Back then, when she disguised herself as a man and met Yan Juexing, she was deeply attracted by his speech and elegant demeanor. He was many times better than the nobles around her. However, after they parted in a hurry, she didn't see him again. After that, she searched the entire Lan city but didn't find any news about Yan Juexing. His accidental appearance opened her heart, but he disappeared without a trace, leaving her with endless melancholy. After that, because she had reached the age of marriage, the emperor had been looking for a husband for her. She used Yan Juexing as the standard and eliminated batch after batch of people that she didn't like. However, at the moment when her father passed away, when she was heartbroken, Yan Juexing magically appeared by her side again. This made her believe that her father knew from the underworld and fulfilled her long-cherished wish. However, this time, Yan Juexing seemed to be a different person. After spending a short time together, he forced her to be his woman. He didn't show any pity in bed. It seemed that he had something unhappy in his heart and was venting it on her. He didn't care if she was dead or alive. It made her heart go through 1,000 twists and turns. But no matter what, his hesitant heart finally had a place to look forward to. Even if she resented him or hated him, she had given her body to him. She was determined to be his woman for the rest of her life. But now, seeing him like this, it seemed that he was going to leave her again. How would she let him go? I beg you, don't leave me. Wenqing hugged Yan Juexing tightly with her attractive naked body. The original arrogance and unruliness had disappeared. Her face was full of the expression of begging and extravagant hope. The death of her father had already hurt her heart. At this time, her heart was as fragile as a window paper. If Yan Juexing took her body and abandoned her, she couldn't imagine how she could live. Suddenly, Yan Juexing turned her over on the bed without warning. He dragged her white and tender thighs over, lay down suddenly, and forcibly entered her body. Then he crazily sprinted again. The huge force almost made Wen Qing's skeleton fall apart. The tearing pain almost made her suffocate, but she still bit her lips and forced a smile to please him. After the raging wind and rain, Yin Juexing lay quietly on one side. Wen Qing next to him seemed to be dead, and her body was motionless. After a long time, Yin Juexing stood quietly under the bed, and Wen Qing's weak plea came from behind him, "Don't leave me." Yin Juexing slowly turned around, and Wen Qing's lifeless eyes showed a pleading look. She stretched out her pale hand powerlessly, as if she was grasping a life-saving straw. She murmured and begged, "Don't leave me." Her outstretched hand suddenly fell down softly. Her eyes slowly closed, and her head tilted to one side powerlessly. The helpless eyes seemed to regard him as the only dependence in this life. The sincere, powerless, and absolute dependence made Yin Juexing, who had been hiding and running for his life, tremble all over. His blood was instantly ignited to boil. At this moment, he suddenly understood that not everyone in this world wanted to kill him or make use of him. There was such a woman who really loved him. She was naked and very frank and needed him to rely on her, without any selfish thoughts. The faint smell of blood filled the room. Yin Juexing's eyes that had turned from cold to soft suddenly shrank. His gaze fell on her lower body, and the dark red blood was soaking the bed. Yin Juexing's cold expression suddenly became terrified. He, who was used to seeing blood, couldn't help but tremble. He shouted helplessly, "Wen Qing." After that, he seemed to realize that he had to save Wen Qing. He took out the elixir from the storage bag on the ground and flashed to the bed. He quickly pointed at Wen Qing's acupoints to stop the bleeding. After stopping the bleeding, he immediately helped Wen Qing sit up. He put a spirit pill into her mouth and sat cross-legged behind her. He placed his palms on Wen Qing's back and desperately injected demonic essence to help her recover. Looking at his anxious and somewhat crazy appearance, it was hard to believe that this person was really Yin Juexing. Wen Qing, who was almost pulled away by the god of death, began to breathe again. Yin Juexing snatched her back from the hands of the god of death. At this time, Yin Juexing finally let out a sigh of relief. He gently picked up Wen Qing and kicked away the blood-stained blanket. He pulled a clean blanket over Wen Qing and placed her on the bed. He carefully stuffed a pillow under her head. Chapter 757. Slowly and meticulously, he put on his clothes and returned to the black-robed Yin Juexing with long hair draped over his shoulders. He slowly sat on the side of the bed and silently watched Hipster's face gradually recover its rosy color. He couldn't help but gently reach out to touch her face. Hipster seemed to sense it. Her eyelids moved slightly, and she seemed to murmur in her sleep, "Don't leave me." Yin Juexing was frightened by this sound and withdrew his hand. He suddenly held his head with both hands and let out a hysterical silent cry. His expression was extremely painful. He didn't know what happened to him just now. Why did he desperately vent his unhappiness on a mortal woman and almost kill her? When Hipster's breathing completely stabilized, Yin Juexing sat on the side in a daze. His expression was dark and gloomy. No one knew what he was thinking. He stared at Hipster's sleeping face and murmured, "Hipster, I hope there will not be a day when you hate me." Suddenly, footsteps came from outside Wenqing Palace. Yin Juexing suddenly looked up, and his face returned to indifference surrounded by a group of people. The new emperor, Wen Hao, came to Wenqing Palace under the guidance of the eunuch of the Department of Rites. There was no other reason. After hearing the eunuch's quiet report, his sister hid in Wenqing Palace and cried her heart out, but the guards didn't let him in to check. Wen Hao, who was deeply in love with his sister, found an excuse to get away from the Empress Dowager and hurried to see her, afraid that his sister would really cry and hurt her health. This time, the guards at the door didn't stop them. They held their sabers at their waist and half knelt to let Wen Hao and the others into Wenqing Palace. The maids in the palace all knelt down. Wen Hao walked out of the room and suddenly turned back to shout at the people behind him, "Wait outside." However, the nascent soul cultivator who was his personal bodyguard, still followed him to the door. It wasn't that the one family couldn't spare experts to protect the emperor, But because of Wen Lanfeng's reputation, no cultivator dared to break into the Bai Wan Kingdom's palace to cause trouble. Therefore, the experts with good cultivation hid in the Wen family's sacred land to cultivate. Royal sister. Wen Hao knocked on the door several times, but there was no reply. Wen Hao hesitated for a moment, then pushed the door open and walked in. As soon as he turned into the bedroom, he saw a quilt and a woman's underwear on the ground. What made him even more shocked was that a man in a black robe with long hair was sitting in front of the bed, staring at him coldly. Wen Hao was shocked. "Who are you? Why are you here?" Suddenly, he saw the other party's eyes glowing red, and his consciousness instantly blurred. When Wen Bai, who was guarding the door, heard the movement inside, his figure moved and immediately flashed in. The imperial bodyguard who followed him from outside also reacted quickly drawing his sword and waving it. He said, "Protect His Majesty." A group of guards pulled out their swords and rushed into the room. Who knew that just as they rushed to the door, they saw Emperor Wen Hao striding out and shouting in a deep voice, "Impudent! Princess Wenqing is not feeling well. Without Zhen's summon, no one is allowed to disturb Princess Wenqing's rest. Retreat to the outside of Wenqing Palace for Zhen." Finished speaking, he turned around and walked back into the inner room. Yes, the group of people retreated out of fear, and not long after, all the people who had just arrived had retreated to the outside of Wenqing Palace. At this moment, Wen Hao and Wen Bai, who were in the bedroom, were bowing to Yan Juexing. "Greetings, master." Yan Juexing looked at Wenqing, who was sleeping soundly, got up from the bed, and waved at the two of them. "Let's go to the main hall and talk. Don't disturb her rest." When the three of them were about to leave the bedroom, Yan Juexing carefully closed the bedroom door. Yan Juexing paced to the main seat in the main hall and sat down. He stared at the two people who were standing respectfully below him and asked, "How many cultivators are there in this palace? What are their cultivations?" Wen Bai immediately replied, "Including me, there are 4 in total, and they're all nascent soul cultivators." "Only 4 nascent soul cultivators?" Yan Juexing was slightly startled, then felt that it made sense. Normal cultivators, even if they were experts at the final stage of tribulation passing, wouldn't dare to trespass into Baiwan Nation's palace, so there was no need to be on guard as if they were facing a great enemy. So he frowned and said, "Don't tell me that when the emperor passes away and the new emperor succeeds the throne, the people in the Wen family's holy land won't care?" Wen Bai replied, "That's not it. When the late emperor is buried, the ancestor of the Wen family, Wen Rui, will come on behalf of the ancestor to crown the new emperor, which means that the new emperor has been recognized by the Holy Land and is allowed to inherit the Wen family's throne." "Wen Rui?" Yan Juexing pondered and said, "Is it the early stage soul formation cultivator Wen Rui, whose cultivation is only below Wen Lanfeng's?" "Yes, it's him," Wen Bai replied. Yan Juexing's eyes flickered. "I've long heard of this person's name. When he comes to crown the new emperor, find a way to bring him here to meet me. If possible, I'd like to go with him to pay my respects to Senior Wen Lanfeng. Sai, I want to thank Senior Wen Lanfeng and the Wen family disciples for taking care of me in Spirit Fong Valley." "Yes." Wen Bai bowed and accepted the order. Sitting cross-legged in a cave under the Lust Plain, Yu Qianshou had already thrown a small pile of depleted spiritual energy stones in front of him. Both of his palms were still holding a big handful of shiny black crystals, crazily absorbing spiritual energy, not daring to stop. If he stopped, the spiritual energy in his dantian would not be able to keep up with the absorption, and his meridians would twitch in pain due to the lack of spiritual energy. Yu Qianshou's eyes widened as he stared at the small pile of depleted spiritual energy stones in front of him. As he threw out the 2 handful of depleted spiritual energy stones, the expression on his face was uglier than crying. If he did not calculate incorrectly, he had already used more than 500 divine grade spirit stones. 1 divine grade spirit stone was equivalent to 100 million high-grade spirit stones. So 500 divine grade spirit stones was equivalent to 50 billion high-grade spirit stones. Oh, my mother! Yu Qianshou calculated in his heart, cold sweat dripping down his forehead. 50 billion high-grade spirit stones. What kind of concept is that? If he had not met Immortal Crocodile, the amount of spirit stones he had swindled from Baikong would not have been enough, and he would have had to use the big pile of treasures he had found in the demonic ghost domain. Even if a cultivator had just stepped into the cultivation world and cultivated all the way to the peak spirit severing realm, he would not have needed 50 billion high-grade spirit stones. What the hell is going on with this broken cultivation technique? Why does it burn so much money? Moreover, it's still burning. Does it want people to live? If it wasn't for his good fortune, what would the consequences of cultivating the 5 elemental cultivation techniques be? Wouldn't he be whipped to death? F***CK. This world is really dark. Even cultivating is forbidden to the poor. Isn't this bullying the poor? At this time, his dantian was like a bottomless black hole. Even after filling it with more than 500 divine grade spirit stones, spiritual energy, it was still not full. It was still madly absorbing spiritual energy with no signs of stopping. It was too scary. At this time, even Huang Xiaolong himself was unable to check the situation inside his dantian and could only crazily transfer spiritual energy into it. When a number of divine grade spirit stones reached 600, Yu Qianshou's heart was already numb. He mechanically took out spirit stones to absorb spiritual energy and only cared about transferring the majestic spiritual energy into his body. Sitting there counting while absorbing spiritual energy, this was the only thing he could do at the moment. There was no point in thinking too much about it. He wanted to see how long this bottomless black hole would take. He refused to believe that this bottomless black hole could absorb all of the 100 million divine grade spirit stones Immortal Crocodile had given him. If there was really no other choice, he could only teleport to the Yellow Earth Layer's prison and ask Immortal Crocodile, that rich guy, to continue supporting him. He believed that Immortal Crocodile wouldn't be stingy. Otherwise, if he died, the old monster would be trapped alive in the Eastern Holy Lands. Thinking of this, Huang Xiaolong's mind was at ease, no longer worrying about not having enough spirit stones. By the time Yu Qianshou counted close to 900 pieces of divine grade spirit stones, the rate of spiritual energy absorption in his dantian suddenly slowed down. Yu Qianshou's eyes lit up. Coincidentally, when he reached 900 pieces of divine grade spirit stones, his dantian finally stopped breathing. Crash! The dried-up spirit stones fell to the ground. Yu Qianshou was speechless looking at them. It had been a long time since he could remember clearly, and he didn't take it to heart at that time. However, he remembered clearly that he had used around 300 million high-grade spirit stones when he cultivated the gold arts on the Immortal Ascension platform. Now, he actually used 90 billion high-grade spirit stones, which was equivalent to a 300-fold increase. Based on this calculation, if he had a chance to cultivate the wood arts, would his spiritual energy increase by another 300-fold? 900 times 300 was equal to 270,000 divine grade spirit stones. Yu Qianshou sucked in a breath of cold air as he suddenly felt that his dantian was abnormally quiet. He quickly used his spiritual sense to check his dantian. Fortunately, the movements inside his dantian were no longer as loud as when he was absorbing spiritual energy. His divine sense was able to detect the movements inside his dantian. At this time, the amount of true essence inside his dantian was as thin as mist. Although the little boy's nascent soul was still the same size, it had turned into a middle-aged man, looking exactly like Yu Qianshou. Sitting cross-legged with his eyes closed, the four-colored crystal bead that had stopped spinning started to spin again, pulling Yu Qianshou's dantian along with it. The spinning speed became faster and faster, dazzling the eyes of those watching. In the end, the things inside his dantian reminded Yu Qianshou of a picture of Saturn from his past lives textbooks. The nascent soul that looked like him was spinning into a round ball, resembling Saturn itself, and the four crystal beads resembled the rings of Saturn's moons. Moreover, they were multicolored rings, extremely beautiful. All of a sudden, a loud boom resounded in his dantian, akin to the Big Bang. The rings of light around the 4 crystal beads suddenly expanded, and the perfectly round nascent soul in the middle exploded into a cloud of dust, filling his dantian in an instant. The dust from the explosion rushed out of his dantian, entering every meridian in Yu Qianzhou's body. In that split second, Yu Qianzhou finally experienced what it meant to be sweet after suffering, feeling so comfortable that he let out a moan. He felt that his whole body was full of explosive energy, a kind of powerful energy that he had never experienced before, so powerful that it felt like it was going to rush out of his body. His bones and veins were stretching and contracting with a creaking sound. It was a pleasant feeling of reaching the sky in a single bound. He opened his eyes abruptly, and they flickered with a bright light. He was filled with unprecedented confidence. Yu Qianzhou took a deep breath and closed his eyes again to check the situation inside his dantian. With just one glance, he was immediately stunned. He saw that the 4 colored crystal beads were spinning at a moderate speed, and 2 nascent souls that looked like him appeared in it. They sat back to back with their eyes closed, inhaling and exhaling the aura inside his dantian to refine it. Yu Qianzhou immediately remembered what Nongzhu had told him about the 3 souls and 7 spirits. The nascent soul was the life soul of the 3 souls and 7 spirits. When another soul was born from the life soul, it would be the heavenly soul, which was the sign that one's cultivation had entered the divinization stage. Chapter 758. Could it be that I've really reached the soul formation stage? Yu Qianzhou asked himself. He was so excited that he was trembling. Although the powerful energy in his body told him that he was right, he still felt like he was dreaming and couldn't believe that it was real. He took a deep breath and stood up slowly. The bones in his body cracked, and he looked up at the top of his head. Suddenly, a huge, imposing aura burst out from his body. His whole body was like an arrow that had left the bow, directly shooting upwards. Boom! A deafening sound echoed. There were few people on a vast plain. It was unknown how many years it had been like this. The yellow earth that had been roasted by the scorching sun suddenly trembled. Then, a pitch-black hole appeared on the flat ground with a bang sound. A silhouette darted out from the smoke and dust that had burst out and stood still in the air for a moment. Yu Qianzhou floated in the air quietly. He clenched his fists in excitement. It didn't take much effort for him to break through the thick yellow earth with his body. He was sure that he had reached the soul formation initial stage. He didn't expect that he would achieve what he had been pursuing for so many years. He didn't expect that he would reach the soul formation stage one day. He thought back to when he first entered Quang-Tsung. He didn't expect that he would become one of the soul formation experts from today onwards. He looked around and felt a sense of pride. He had been improving rapidly. He believed that one day he would be like his master by Changchun and become a real torture master of the demon region. Roar! Yu Qianzhou floated in the air and opened his arms. He looked up to the sky and let out a long howl. His passionate howl echoed across the vast yellow earth plain. The long howl stopped. He was in high spirits. His gaze was like an owl as he stared at the hole that he had created on a yellow soil plain. He waved his palm to cover the hole and shouted, "Rise!" The yellow earth plain below surged like waves and piled up in the middle. It got taller and taller. In a short while, a cone-shaped mountain rose from the ground. The mountain rose to a height of 100 meters and supported Yu Qianzhou. Yu Qianzhou stood quietly at the peak of the 100-meter-high mountain and gazed into the distance. There were many experts that he could look up to in that distant place. In that distant place, his master, by Changchun, was constantly surpassing himself and improving his cultivation. What about him? He was only at the soul formation initial stage. Compared to them, he was still far from them. There was nothing to be happy about. He still had a long way to go. However, Yu Qianzhou's eyes flashed. He suddenly said to the world, "In 100 years, who will rise and fall? Rise!" With a deep shout, As he spread his arms, the 100-meter-tall mountain under his feet suddenly shot out a group of densely packed yellow dots, shooting into the surroundings and disappearing without a trace. As he clapped his palms together, the yellow dots that were flying in all directions quickly flew back with a whistling sound, and all stopped around the mountain peak. Yu Qianqiu was surrounded by flying swords made of yellow soil. There were at least 10,000 of them, myriad swords as one. Yu Qianqiu shouted in a deep voice. He pointed the sword control art toward the sky, and the surrounding flying swords immediately swarmed. In an instant, the earthy yellow flowing light flickered in all directions, and tens of thousands of swords danced in the air with astonishing momentum. They all quickly converged in the direction he pointed. In the blink of an eye, a gigantic sword hovered in the air and spun slowly. Yu Qianqiu pointed at the vast land with the sword control spell, and the gigantic sword whistled downwards. Bang! The earth trembled, and the giant sword sank into the yellow plain in an instant. It was also at this moment that the dirt mountain beneath Yu Qianqiu's feet began to disperse like quicksand, spreading layer by layer in all directions. Yu Qianqiu followed the lowered mountain and landed steadily on the yellow plain. Everything around him returned to normal, as if nothing had happened in the first place. Translator, Exodus Tales Editor. Exodus Tales Yu Qianqiu landed on the yellow plain. The yellow dust stirred up by the wind blew past his feet. Yu Qianqiu held his chin with one hand and stood alone on the yellow plain, frowning and deep in thought. The figure immersed in the yellow soil under the setting sun looked lonely and mysterious. Judging from the previous 3 kinds of 5-element spells, each of them was not simple. As long as it was used properly, it could exert its magical effect. The fire spell was the spell he had always used the most frequently. After absorbing the black fire, the use of the black fire became his trump card to defeat the enemy. After comprehending the absorbing star's great technique of the water spell, he found that it was a wonderful spell for killing people. He hid it as a trump card and rarely used it. As for the gold spell, although it was not suitable for killing people, its magical effect was extraordinary. So far, he had not found any metal magic weapon that could block its attack. All kinds of metal magic weapons that he had tried were immediately turned into dust as soon as they touched the gold spell. Many magic weapons that he had obtained in the cultivation world turned into floating clouds. He even had the impulse to use the gold spell to test the godly sword. However, he was afraid that the power of the gold spell would destroy the godly sword, so he refrained from experimenting with it. He could only wait for an opportunity to use other people's treasures to experiment. So far, the gold spell had not been used in actual combat. It was only used to scare people, because he found that the gold spell was more suitable for people with high cultivation in close combat. It was not suitable for long-range attacks. In close combat, it could unexpectedly destroy the opponent's magic weapon and then kill them. If it was used with other spells, the auxiliary power would be quite amazing. Its practical significance was not weaker than any other spells. Now that his cultivation had broken through to the soul formation stage in one fell swoop, the range of his chi movement was wider. Whether it was using the flying sword, the absorbing star's great technique, or the gold spell, he could exert greater power, especially the absorbing star's great technique. With the current cultivation of the soul formation stage, once it was used on a large scale, it was simply an unparalleled killing spell. Even he felt a little scared when he thought about it. If such a spell fell into the hands of people with bad intentions, it would be a big disaster. Of course, there were times when the absorbing star's great technique failed. It was in the battle with Yan Zhuixing in Lingfang Valley. Yu Qianqiu still couldn't understand why the absorbing star's great technique couldn't kill Yan Zhuixing. He clearly couldn't resist it. He had already been sucked dry, but he could still come back to life. It was simply incredible. Could it be because they all had the word Xing in their names? Like repels like? Bullshit. The power of these 3 spells had already made Yu Qianqiu confident. The only thing he didn't know was how to properly use the earth spell that he had just successfully cultivated. If it was only used to pile up a mountain of earth and gather an earth sword, it would be too boring. Even if it was an earth-controlling technique like Huang Tian, Yu Qianqiu didn't care anymore. For the earth spell, it was just child's play. After thinking about it, Yu Qianqiu still couldn't figure out how to use it to display the power that the earth spell should have. The ability of the first 3 spells was clear for all to see. He didn't believe that the earth spell was so useless. If only Master Bai Changchun was here. Perhaps with his extraordinary perception, he could give some pointers. Thinking back, wasn't the absorbing star's great technique taught by Changchun? Otherwise, Yu Qianqiu wouldn't have thought that the water spell could be used in this way and display such power. After thinking for a long time, he still couldn't figure out anything. He realized that thinking like this wasn't a solution. He could only wait for himself to slowly understand. Looking around, he was suddenly slightly shocked. He didn't know how long he had been here. If Huang Tian found out that he wasn't in the underground palace, would he find a mortal crocodile and the others in the dungeon to settle the score? I hope the old monster can hold on. Yu Qianqiu suddenly disappeared from the plains. In the dungeon of Lust City, as soon as Yu Qianqiu appeared, he quickly glanced around and immediately heaved a sigh of relief. No one was missing inside. Boli and the others were playing with the straw under there, but out of boredom. Immortal Crocodile was using his arms as a pillow and crossed his legs, seemingly imitating Yu Qianqiu. As soon as he saw Yu Qianqiu appear, Immortal Crocodile stood up straight and transmitted his voice. "Where did you go, kid?" Yu Qianqiu waved his hand, indicating that there was no hurry to ask this. He transmitted his voice back. "How long have I been gone?" Immortal Crocodile was stunned. "You've been living your life in a daze. You don't even know how long you've been gone? 3 days. You've been gone for 3 whole days." "Oh." Yu Qianqiu nodded slightly, thinking that it wasn't long. He asked again, "In the 3 days I was gone, did anyone cause trouble for you? I say, kid, did you leave this place because you wanted to be alone and watch others cause trouble for us?" Immortal Crocodile sneered. "I'm sorry to disappoint you. We've been sleeping here every day, and no one has even come to ask us questions." Yu Qianqiu immediately waved his hand and interrupted him. "Don't talk nonsense if you don't know. I've been busy helping you recover your cultivation, and I've almost broken my legs. Why are you still here nagging? Do you have any conscience?" As he spoke, he frowned and pondered. If Huang Tian knew that he had escaped the dungeon, he would definitely come to check this place. Now it seemed that Huang Tian didn't know that he had escaped the dungeon, so there was still room for discussion. Immortal Crocodile's expression stiffened, and then he asked excitedly, "How are you doing?" "There's already some progress, don't worry." Yu Qianqiu glanced at them and said in a deep voice, "It's not a good idea to stay here all the time. Nothing can be done. I'll go find Huang Tian again and ask him to let us out and give us an honorable identity." Hearing that there was some progress in recovering his cultivation, Immortal Crocodile immediately said humbly, "I'm not in a hurry. I'm not in a hurry. You go on with your work, Is Huang Tian that easy to talk to? Don't worry about it. I'll think of a way. Wait for me. I'll leave first." Yu Qianqiu said and disappeared again. The dungeon was still the same, and the things inside were still the same. Yu Qianqiu checked everywhere with his hands behind his back, guessing that Huang Tian might not have returned. His sharp gaze landed on a mud wall, and he waved his sleeves at it. The wall immediately melted like snow, and a pitch-black hole quickly appeared. It didn't seal itself like the last time. Child's play. Yu Qianqiu snorted disdainfully. He waved his sleeves, and the hole quickly healed. He walked back to the table, looked at the mud ball on the table, and waved his hand, turning it into dust. Chapter 759. Lust City's triennial fence meet had begun. In the beginning, the so-called fence meet had indeed used wooden fences to surround the competition grounds. This was also the origin of the fence meet's name. However, with the passage of time, many cities had appeared in the originally barbaric Eastern Holy Land. The fence meet had long since lost its wooden fences, and the competition grounds were specially built. If Yu Qianqiu were to see it, he would definitely discover that the competition grounds were very similar to the ancient Roman Colosseum. Although the locals in the city usually held the natives in disdain, they were still very interested in the fence meet. That kind of bloody and barbaric scene could thoroughly arouse the passion of these city dwellers. Therefore, every time the fence meet was held, it was usually very difficult to obtain a ticket, and not everyone could enter to watch the competition. In the competition grounds, there were 20 warriors from various tribes divided into 10 groups, fiercely confronting each other. Within the 10 partition boxes, 2 of them had already finished their matches in advance. The victors waved their strong arms and roared excitedly as they left the arena, their bodies covered in blood. The losers, on the other hand, were already lying motionless on the ground, no longer breathing. As soon as the onlookers saw the blood, their passion was immediately ignited, and they cheered loudly at the victors who left the arena. No one cared whether the wounded who were dragged away were dead or alive. Next to the arena stood a tall tower, which could also be considered a landmark of Lust City. In a small room at the top of the tower, Lust City's Lord Huang Tian and Immortal City's emissary Yufeng were indifferently watching the fights below through the window. The cheers from below could be heard clearly from above. The first round of matches in the arena below had already ended, and the people for the next round were currently entering the arena. Huang Tian stared down below and indifferently asked, "Brother Yufeng, I heard that someone turned the Great Lord's mansion upside down and killed many people. Has the person who caused the trouble been caught?" Yufeng's expression became solemn, and he said in a deep voice, "That person is very likely a cultivator from the outside world, but he's very strong." "Very strong?" Huang Tian smiled faintly and said, "Since we suspect it's a cultivator from the human world, how strong can a cultivator from the human world be?" Yufeng shook his head and muttered to himself, "No one knows the exact origins of this person, but there's no need to doubt his valiant methods. Let's not talk about the trouble he caused in the Great Lord's mansion. He charged into the Immortal City twice, but no one was able to stop him. You can imagine his methods." Huang Tian's body trembled when he heard this. He turned around and cried out involuntarily, "What did you say?" There were as many experts in the Immortal City as there were clouds in the sky. He had barged in twice, but no one could make him stay? How is this possible? Could it be that the 2 immortal monarchs were not present at that time? Yufeng gazed into the distance through the window with a lingering fear in his eyes. He sighed and said, "It's like a tiger entering a flock of sheep." The first time he barged into the Immortal City, he killed over 100 immortal cultivators. Among them, there were 3 early-stage immortal emperors, and the rest were mostly grand immortals. In the end, it was Immortal Monarch Night Owl who managed to severely injure him, but he managed to escape. What? Immortal Monarch Night Owl didn't manage to stop him? Huang Tian cried out again. There was no doubt about the abilities of the 12 immortal monarchs in the immortal world. They were some of the top figures in the immortal world, and were only second to Immortal Emperor Jintai. Huang Tian was suddenly pulled back to reality by the passionate cheers in the arena. He asked impatiently again, didn't he barge into the Immortal City twice? Did he still dare to barge into the Immortal City after being severely injured by the Immortal Monarch? That person is a monster. He recovered from such heavy injuries in just a few days. Yufeng shook his head and smiled bitterly. Just when Immortal Monarch Night Owl was making arrangements to capture him, he actually came to us. The second time he barged into the Immortal City, his cultivation seemed to have increased by quite a bit. He managed to enter and exit from the encirclement of over 1,000 people and killed over 300 immortal cultivators, including 8 early-stage immortal emperors. How terrifying! Huang Tian was dumbfounded by these words and asked tongue-tied, Kill so many people? Did Immortal Monarch let him go? He had actually guessed it in his heart. With Immortal Monarch Night Owl's vengeful personality, how could he allow that person to escape again? Perhaps even Immortal Monarch Night Owl couldn't stop him. It's not that he was let go, but that he couldn't. Yufeng revealed a frightened expression as he recalled. Towards the end, no one dared to make a move against him anymore. Wherever he went, the people there would all flee. In the end, Immortal Monarch Night Owl had a one-on-one duel with him. What was the result? Huang Tian asked. Yufeng looked around warily, hesitating as if there were some things that he couldn't say. Huang Tian immediately guessed that the latter part of his words might be disrespectful to immortal monarch Night Owl. He couldn't say out loud, so he transmitted his voice. Brother Yufeng, don't worry. You and I will communicate through voice transmission. No one else will know what you said today. Yufeng nodded slightly and transmitted his voice with mixed feelings. In that battle, immortal monarch Night Owl was no match for him. The last time that person barged into the immortal city, he was severely injured by immortal monarch Night Owl's treasure, the 1,000 feather wings. This time, immortal monarch Night Owl's treasure, the 1,000 feather wings, was completely destroyed by that person, and an immortal monarch Night Owl was injured quite badly. Huang Tian was immediately shocked. As someone from the immortal world, of course he knew about immortal monarch Night Owl's treasure, the 1,000 feather wings. It was a top-grade treasure that could attack and defend in the immortal world. What shocked him the most was that immortal monarch Night Owl was injured. Yufeng continued to transmit his voice with mixed feelings. At this critical moment, Western Palace Juwu, immortal monarch, who rarely shows herself, appeared. The two immortal monarchs joined forces to fight that person. That battle could be said to be earth-shattering. Ever since the battle against the 1,000 Swords Demon Monarch, it has been many years since there was a huge battle. Almost half of the huge immortal city is in ruins. Even if an ordinary person wanted to help, they wouldn't be able to. Two immortal monarchs joined forces, and they let him escape? Huang Tian's face was full of disbelief. Yufeng shook his head slightly and said, he did escape, but with two immortal monarchs working together, it's not that easy. In addition, immortal monarch Night Owl was fighting with all his might. That person ran with injuries. Otherwise, with that person's ruthlessness, he wouldn't have retreated unless he had no other choice. Huang Tian narrowed his eyes and said, that's strange. Since he was no match for two immortal monarchs working together, why didn't they chase him? The entire continent is like a cage, and he was seriously injured. Where could he run to? Immortal monarch Night Owl doesn't seem like someone who nurtures a tiger. You won't believe me even if I tell you. Yufeng's eyes were burning with passion as he lowered his voice and said, that person could actually enter and exit the heaven and earth formation at will. The two immortal monarchs were determined not to let him go, and they chased him all the way to the sky. Who knew that they would be stopped by the heaven and earth formation, and that person could directly pass through it, leaving them in the dust. That smell is very similar to the 1,000 Swords Demon Monarch back then. What? Huang Tian was dumbfounded. He can enter and exit the heaven and earth formation at will? How is that possible? He immediately thought of Yu Qianqiu, who was still trapped underground, and he already suspected if there was any connection between the two. Yufeng sneered and said, actually, in terms of cultivation, I'm afraid that person is no match for any immortal monarch. However, not only is his cultivation high, but he also seems to be able to borrow the power of heaven and earth. After he escaped from the heaven and earth great array, everyone understood that since the heaven and earth great array couldn't restrain him, he could fight to his heart's content and didn't have to worry about the array taking away half of his immortal essence. Think about it. Immortal Monarch Night Owl consumes 20% of his celestial core power to unleash 10% of his power, but he can unleash 100% of his power with 100% of his power. How can Immortal Monarch Night Owl not be at a disadvantage when they fight? Hearing this, Huang Tian nodded vaguely. It seemed like he agreed, but in fact, he didn't agree. How could accounts be calculated like this? Although it was a little disadvantageous and would affect the endurance of the fight, when it came to fighting, one could still unleash as much power as one had. It was just that the consumption of celestial core power would be doubled. Moreover, didn't the two immortal monarchs join forces in the end? Although he thought so, Yufeng seemed to be protecting the immortal monarch's face, so he couldn't say too much. After a moment of silence, he asked, why did this person barge into the celestial city? Is there something in the celestial city that he wants? Hearing this, Yufeng didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He said, what does he want? He doesn't want anything. That person is a complete madman. The first time he came to the Celestial City, he called out 2 immortal monarchs to fight him. Of course, the people below wouldn't be polite and immediately attacked. The second time he came again. With the previous lesson, everyone could see that this person wasn't ordinary. Naturally, they weren't in a hurry to attack, because they couldn't keep fighting with him for no reason. They had to know the reason for the fight. So this time, someone asked him why he came to challenge the immortal monarchs and what his intentions were. Guess what his answer was? Huang Tian was stunned and asked, "How did he answer?" That madman said, he came to fight, to lose, until he met an opponent that he couldn't surpass and died in battle. This was his lifelong wish, and he had no other wish. Yufeng didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He said, "Do you think this person is a madman?" After so long, he didn't have any intentions. He just came to the Celestial City to fight the immortal monarchs. Say, everyone has been idle for so many years. Don't those people who were beaten to death for no reason feel wronged? Huang Tian was speechless. For someone like this who was purely seeking death for the sake of fighting, it wasn't wrong to say that he was a madman. Huang Tian was stunned and asked weakly. This time he escaped again. Will he come a third time? Come. Yufeng said unhappily. Before he escaped, he laughed loudly and said that it was satisfying, saying that this trip was not in vain. He even said to the 2 immortal monarchs that he would come again after he recovered. When the 2 immortal monarchs heard that he was going to come again, they felt a headache coming. For a madman like this who became stronger and stronger the more he fought, who was not afraid of fighting, who could bear to fight with him, Immortal Monarch Knight Owl has already gone to the underground world to contact the 2 netherworld generals. Chapter 760. Contact the 2 netherworld generals? Huang Tian was surprised. The 2 netherworld generals have not come out for a long time, and there has always been a barrier between them and the people of the immortal world. Can the immortal lord pull them out? Maybe not usually. Yufeng's eyes were burning. But don't forget, that madman can enter and exit the heaven and earth formation at will. As long as we capture that madman, we can unravel the secret of entering and exiting the formation. Do you think the 2 netherworld generals can resist such a huge temptation? If that madman dares to come again, the 2 immortal lords and the 2 netherworld generals can work together and subdue him. That's true. Huang Tian, who was nodding slightly, suddenly raised his eyebrows. His eyes flickered, and he smiled. Brother Yufeng, please wait a moment. I just remembered something. I'll be back soon. Yufeng raised his hand and smiled. City Lord Huang is too polite. Please go ahead. Huang Tian cupped his hands and disappeared from the room in the tower. After returning to the City Lord Manor, Huang Tian casually walked towards a secluded corner of the garden. As he walked, his entire body suddenly sank into the ground. Inside the underground palace, Yu Qianshou, who was sitting in front of a table with his eyes closed, suddenly opened his eyes. He stared at the walls of the underground palace in front of him. There was a ripple, and Huang Tian strolled out, giving off the feeling of an immortal passing through walls. What? You finally thought it through? Huang Tian walked over with a smile, revealing an expression that said, "At least you're sensible." Yu Qianshou sized him up, then leaned back on the chair and supported his chin with his hand. He said in a low voice, "I've thought it through. I can't leave this continent sealed by the heaven and earth formation alone, so I need your help. In other words, I need to work with you." Huang Tian's smile froze, and he frowned. "Why don't I understand what you mean? It's very simple." Yu Qianshou stood up and sighed. "Believe it or not, I'll tell you the truth. I've been researching the mysteries of the heaven and earth formation. I spent a lot of time and finally found a way to come in. However, if I want to leave, I'll need to spend more time researching. However, I'm very confident in my attainments and formations. Since I can come in, I can definitely get out. As long as we find the eye of the formation, getting out will be a piece of cake. Do you think I'll believe your nonsense?" Huang Tian sneered and said, "Actually, it's very simple for me to let you go. There's no need to spout nonsense. You just need to tell me how to leave. I promise I won't kill you." He had already thought it through. As long as he could get his hands on the method to leave, he could promise not to kill him. However, not killing him didn't mean that he couldn't cripple him. "Damn it, try to play this game with me." Yu Qinsho raised an eyebrow, his face full of mockery as he said, "City Lord Huang, I think you're mistaken about one thing. If I really wanted to leave this place, I don't need your permission to let me go. Ymir Underground Palace can't trap me. The reason why I haven't left until today is that I've used these few days to think things through, and I feel that cooperating with you is the best choice." "Oh." Huang Tian revealed a face full of mockery and said, "Then I'd like to see how you can leave this place if I don't let you go. If you really have the ability to leave this underground palace, I'll agree to cooperate with you." He didn't believe that Yu Qinsho would obediently stay here if he could leave this place. Hee. It seems that if I don't show some sincerity, City Lord Huang won't believe me at all." Yu Qinsho shook his head and sighed. I've always been a low-profile person and don't like to be ostentatious. But fine. Today I'll show off a little. It'll also let City Lord Huang know my sincerity in cooperating with you." Under Huang Tian's disdainful gaze, this guy looked around and stretched out a hand, pointing at the place Huang Tian had just come out from. The earthen wall on the opposite side melted away like snow, revealing a pitch-black hole that was 2 meters wide and wide enough for a person to pass through. "City Lord Huang, do you believe me now?" Yu Qinsho asked with a deadpan expression. Huang Tian was completely dumbfounded. In the end, Yu Qinsho shook his head and muttered to himself, "Not saying anything. That means you don't believe me." Fine, he stretched out his hand again, and with 2 fingers, he pointed to the east, then to the west, then to the left, then to the right. In short, he randomly pointed to the front, back, left, right, up, down, down, and down. In the blink of an eye, the underground palace was filled with holes, and the underground palace couldn't be considered an underground palace anymore. It was completely an underground hub that connected in all directions. After finishing his work, Yu Qinsho put his hands behind his back and asked with a face full of mockery, "City Lord Huang, which hole do you think I should leave from?" Huang Tian was flabbergasted. After a while, he asked, "So you also know how to control Earth?" I've always been a low-profile person. There's no need to mention this." Yu Qinsho waved his hand apologetically, as if it was just a small trick that wasn't worth mentioning. Huang Tian was speechless. Then, he asked with a complicated expression, "How do you want to cooperate?" He suddenly felt like he was fooling himself. After seeing Yu Qinsho's methods, he completely believed in Yu Qinsho's sincerity. Otherwise, Yu Qinsho could really leave at any time. There was no need to wait for him. Yu Qinsho waved his sleeve, and all the holes in the underground palace instantly closed up, returning to normal. He said solemnly, "Let's work together and find the formation core. As long as we find it, I'll be able to think of a way to leave." Huang Tian looked at the underground palace that had returned to normal and said, "This formation was set up by the Myriad Swords Demon Monarch. I'm afraid no one knows where the formation core is. Even if we want to find it, it's easier said than done in such a vast continent. Don't you have someone like me who's proficient in formations?" Yu Qinsho patted his chest and said, "According to my experience, the heaven-earth formation is so powerful, so it needs a powerful energy to support its operation. I'm sure that the powerful energy supporting the heaven-earth formation is the formation core. As long as we find where the powerful energy is, we'll have a way to leave this place. Think about it. Where can we find the powerful energy supporting the heaven-earth formation? The powerful energy supporting the heaven-earth formation?" Huang Tian frowned and suddenly exclaimed, "Purple flames. Could the purple flames be the formation core?" Finally, the main topic. Yu Qinsho was secretly happy when he heard that. "Luckily, you're not completely clueless, or else I'll have to slowly guide you." However, he asked with an ignorant expression, Purple flames? What's purple flames? Huang Tian immediately explained the true Samadhi fire in detail. Yu Qianshou listened patiently and immediately clapped his hands and cheered. That's right, that's it. There's no doubt about it. The purple flames are the formation core. Do you have a way to find it? As long as we find it, we'll be able to leave this broken place. Huang Tian pursed his lips and nodded excitedly. Since the purple flames are the formation core, it's easy now that we have a target. We won't have to search aimlessly. Maybe we'll have to spend some time to ask around, but we'll definitely find it. After all, the purple flames aren't ordinary. The target is no small matter. As long as it's shown, someone will definitely know. I've heard people mention it before, but I didn't pay much attention to it. I didn't expect it to be the formation core. Hearing someone mention the purple flames, Yu Qianshou's body trembled. He walked over and grabbed Huang Tian's arm. He said anxiously, "Who mentioned it? Quickly go and ask him. Don't pull and pull." Huang Tian pushed his hand away and paced around. He said sadly, "That person offended Immortal Lord Night Owl and was killed by Immortal Lord Night Owl. F***CK. Yu Qianshou almost choked to death. What nonsense! Huang Tian saw that he wasn't faking his anxiety and nodded in his heart. It seemed that the purple flames were indeed the formation core. He comforted him. "Don't worry. I also want to leave this place as soon as possible. Don't worry. As long as the target is locked onto the heaven and earth universe formation, there will definitely be more than one person who has seen it. I'll find a way to find out about the purple flames as soon as possible." Yu Qianshou calmed down a little and began to ponder whether he should think of a way to leak the news that he could leave the heaven and earth Great Qinquan formation. Old Huang's ability seemed to be limited. He should be able to find the purple flames faster with the help of the immortal monarchs of the eastern and western palaces. Huang Tian's heart trembled slightly when he saw Yu Qianshou's gaze drifting about. He narrowed his eyes and said in a deep voice, "Yu Qianshou, since you and I have agreed to cooperate, I hope no one else knows about this." His tone concealed a hint of threat. Yu Qianshou raised his eyebrows and said, "Don't worry about this. I have quite a reputation outside and am doing very well. I don't want all the masters here to go out and join in the fun. The world can't accommodate so many great gods. City Lord Huang, on the other hand, you have to be careful when you find the purple flames. I know what I'm doing. You don't have to worry about it." Huang Tian paused and suddenly said, "Speaking of the outside, I thought of something. I don't know if you know this person. This person can actually ignore the heaven and earth Qian Kuan formation." He immediately repeated what Yu Feng had said. Yu Qianshou was speechless. He didn't need to guess to know that it must be that amazing master of his. Who else could it be other than him? This old man was as monstrous as ever. The more he played, the bigger he got. He hoped that he didn't kill himself. But then again, worrying for him was unnecessary. The old man insisted on walking the path of terror, and no one could stop him. After thinking about it, he shook his head and said, "I've never heard of such an expert in the world." Huang Tian nodded and said, "I also feel that it's impossible for there to be such an expert in the world. Maybe he's a rising star in the celestial world." Yu Qianshou waved his hand and said, "Let's not talk about him. Let's talk about me first. My native friends are still in prison. Why don't you find a reason to release them and give us a free identity?" Huang Tian nodded to indicate that he would arrange it. Yu Qianshou looked around and said, "You should keep this underground palace. If there's anything, we'll meet here. Let's just say it like this. I'll go to prison first. Quickly release us. I'm leaving." After saying that, he dashed into the mud wall and disappeared. Huang Tian's face twitched. This underground palace really couldn't trap him. Chapter 761. In the dungeon, as soon as Yu Qianshou appeared, Immortal Lord Crocodile immediately transmitted his voice to him. "Did you find Huang Tian?" Yu Qianshou did not disturb the others. He quietly lay down beside him and replied with a voice transmission, "It's done. We will be able to leave in no time." "You killed his men. He didn't make things difficult for you?" Immortal Lord Crocodile asked curiously. You're worrying too much. There's nothing I can't handle. This is what it means to be capable. Yu Qianqiu lay down on a pile of straw and crossed his legs. The two of them chatted casually. Sure enough, after waiting for a while, the sound of the metal door opening came from outside. The footsteps were getting closer and closer. After the door of the cell was opened, under the dim light, someone shouted at the door, "All of you come out." Boli and the others hurriedly stood up and walked out. The guard scolded them a few times and led them outside. Once out of the dungeon, Boli and the others felt that the sunlight was blinding because they had stayed in the dark for too long. In the courtyard outside the dungeon stood a few soldiers in bright armor. They were obviously of a higher grade than the guards here. A man with a dignified aura slowly sized them up. After that, he asked in a deep voice, "Who is Yu Qianqiu?" "I am." Yu Qianqiu, who was the smallest among them, stood out. The man looked at him meaningfully and said in a relaxed tone, "You can go out, but you have been stripped of your right to participate in the fence gathering. Without permission, you cannot leave Lust City." Boli and the others looked at each other and kept quiet. They were obviously a little afraid. To them, the city guards were people they had to look up to. Yu Qianqiu frowned. This must be Huang Tian's order. He did not know what the old man meant. Was there any meaning in doing this? Immortal Lord Crocodile said impatiently, "Can we go now?" With his pride, if it was not to cooperate with Yu Qianqiu, he would not stay in a place like this to be scolded. The man didn't get angry and nodded without changing his expression. Immortal Crocodile was the first to leave. Yu Qianqiu smiled and waved at Boli and the rest. Let's go. It's fine now." He guessed that these guys must have been living in fear for the past few days. The man with the dignified aura silently watched them leave, and his expression seemed to be deep in thought. The sacred palace of Baiwan country, which was hidden in the deep mountains and beautiful rivers, was pure white and smooth like jade. Under the illumination of the sun, it radiated a warm light. It was symmetrical with the surrounding mountain scenery, like a piece of jade embedded in the mountain, with the mountains on one side and the water on the other. It was holy and pure. The air outside was fresh and green, with birds chirping and flowers blooming everywhere. In front of the white jade railings of the temple stood Wen Lanfeng in a plain gray robe. The color of his robe reflected his mood. The pleasant scenery could not dispel the faint melancholy in his eyes. The plain gray robe, the slender figure, and the melancholy eyes stood there quietly, looking extremely lonely. He had been standing here for a long time, and no one dared to disturb him. The peerless beauty of Lingfeng Valley still lingered in his dreams. His infatuation had not wavered for countless years on the flowering path outside. A man calmly walked over and bowed to the dazed Wen Lanfeng. "Elder ancestor." Wen Lanfeng slowly came back to his senses and smiled faintly. "It's Wen Rue. What's the matter? What's the matter?" Wen Rue smiled and reported. "It's like this. There's someone outside who wants to see you. I can't chase him away, so I'm here to ask for your permission." "Oh." Wen Lanfeng frowned slightly. "Who wants to see me?" Wen Rue muttered. "I don't know if it's true or not. He claims to be Yin Juexing, but I don't think so." "Yin Juexing?" Wen Lanfeng's eyes instantly turned sharp. He asked in a low voice, "Where is he?" Yin Juexing had taken away Lu Yanqing's disciple, Xian Laosan, which worried Lu Yanqing. How could he not care about it? "He's waiting by the heart-cleansing lake." Before Wen Rue finished his words, Wen Lanfeng had already turned into a shadow and flew away. Wen Rue immediately followed him. In the depths of the jungle, the heart-cleansing lake was as calm as a mirror, reflecting the blue sky and white clouds. From time to time, various kinds of birds flew by. There were pavilions built by the lake, which are the residences for receiving guests. Mist curled up from the lake, setting off the scenery here like a fairyland on earth. A black-robed man stood by the lake. His silky black hair was draped over his shoulders, covering half of his face. He was expressionless as he watched the fish swimming leisurely in the lake. No one knew what he was thinking. Two figures landed behind him, one in front and one behind. He continued to stare at the lake silently. Wen Lanfeng was slightly startled when he saw the black-robed man. He had seen Yin Juexing before. At that time, Yin Juexing's cultivation was only at the early stage of crossing calamity. But this man's cultivation was clearly at the early stage of soul formation. Wen Lanfeng stared at the back of the black-robed man and said in a low voice, "Who are you? Why did you pretend to be Yin Juexing and trick me to come out and meet you? Do you think I have a good temper? How would I dare to lie to you, Senior One? I'm afraid you're forgetful." The unmoving black-robed man finally turned around slowly. His long black hair fluttered even though there was no wind. It was Yin Juexing's true appearance. "You." Wen Lanfeng was shocked. He had seen Yin Juexing before. This man's appearance was indeed Yin Juexing's, but he could not be wrong about his cultivation. He quickly stared at Yin Juexing's left hand. He remembered Lu Yanqing saying that Yin Juexing's left hand had been chopped off by Yu Qianqiu, and this man's left hand was intact. Lu Yanqing would definitely not lie to him. "You're definitely not Yin Juexing. Who are you?" Wen Lanfeng shouted. He was really angry. Someone actually dared to trick him in front of him. No matter how good his temper was, he could not hold it in anymore. Yin Juexing slowly raised his left hand and said coldly, "Senior One must be wondering why my hand, which was chopped off by Yu Qianqiu, is still here, right? Yes, it was once chopped off by Yu Qianqiu, but it grew back. And my cultivation must be very strange to you, right? Actually, life is full of miracles. There's nothing strange about it." What he said was all the doubts in Wen Lanfeng's heart, but such an answer did not satisfy Wen Lanfeng. Wen Lanfeng still doubted. "Are you really Yin Juexing?" Yin Juexing shook his head slightly and said, "I thought Senior One would have a better vision. I didn't expect you to be so mediocre. I'm really disappointed. Isn't Senior One on good terms with Yu Qianqiu? You must have heard him mention that I'm cultivating demonic arts." He stared at his left hand coldly and said indifferently, "It's all thanks to the demonic arts that I can stand here today." When Lanfeng's pupil shrank, even if the other party was really Yin Juexing, his attitude towards him was too calm. Did he think that he was a match for him just because his cultivation had reached the early stage of soul formation? When Lanfeng snorted and said, "So, you're really Yin Juexing?" Yin Juexing put down his left hand and nodded slightly. "Yes. Moreover, impersonating Yin Juexing won't do me any good. It will even make Senior One unhappy. Why would I do that?" After confirming Yin Juexing's identity, Wen Lanfeng ignored the miracle that happened to him because he did not feel that it had anything to do with him. He immediately shouted, "Where's third Xin? Third Xin?" Yin Juexing said indifferently, "It seems that the rumor in the cultivation world is true. Senior One has long fallen for the world's most beautiful woman. If there's a chance, I'd like to see how beautiful the so-called world's most beautiful woman is to be able to make Senior One fall in love with her. I'll ask you for the last time. Where's third Xin?" When Lanfeng's eyes turned cold and his body exuded a faint killing intent, Yin Juexing shook his head slightly and said without fear, "Senior One, please answer my question first. If I'm satisfied, I'm willing to return third Xin to Senior Lu. Otherwise, don't even think about knowing where third Xin is even if you kill me." When Lanfeng clenched his fists and said in a deep voice, "Speak. Senior One and Yu Qianqiu's relationship is not ordinary. I believe Senior One must know where Yu Qianqiu is." Yin Juexing's black robe and long hair suddenly fluttered without any wind. He asked word by word, "I want to know where Yu Qianqiu is." When Lanfeng was slightly stunned, it was obvious that Yin Juexing wanted to find Yu Qianqiu for revenge. With Yin Juexing's current cultivation, he was afraid that Yu Qianqiu would have a hard time. Moreover, it was impossible for him to tell Yin Juexing that Yu Qianqiu was Niu Yud. He paused and said, "Hand over third Xin and I can let you go today." Yin Juexing's eyes lit up and he sneered, "It seems that Senior One knows where Yu Qianqiu is. You just don't want to say it. If that's the case, I won't force you. I believe I can find other people who know. Goodbye." Just when he was about to turn around, he heard Wen Lanfeng shout, "Stop. Do you think you can leave today?" "Oh." Yin Juexing stopped and shook his head. that's not necessarily true. You don't have the ability, but you have the guts. You don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Today, I will let you know what is certain. Just when Lanfeng was about to make a move, he suddenly felt a slight movement behind him. He thought that when Rue was going to attack on his behalf. Unexpectedly, he felt a chill in his chest. An ice-cold sword had already pierced through his chest. When Lanfeng stretched out 2 fingers at lightning speed to clamp the sword's edge to prevent it from moving and causing him more serious injuries. He suddenly looked back and saw that the person who sneak attacked him was none other than Rue, who was standing behind him. He was desperately urging the sword in his hand to kill him. At this moment, Lanfeng's mood was no less than being struck by lightning. He only felt cold all over and roared. Rue, you bastard, the difference in their cultivation was too big. Lanfeng's impressive cultivation was not child's play. When Rue saw that his sword was caught between Lanfeng's 2 fingers and he was unable to move it even after exerting all his cultivation, he was immediately shocked. He immediately abandoned his sword and flashed over, swinging his palm towards the top of Lanfeng's head. Looking at this move, it was obvious that he wanted to kill Lanfeng in one blow. Chapter 762. Lanfeng had never dreamed of such a day. Since he stepped into the cultivation world, he had been prepared to die a horrible death. However, he had never thought that the Wen family wanted to kill him, especially when Rue, who had no chance to step into the soul formation stage without his strong support. Otherwise, when Rue would not be able to hurt him even if he had a little bit of defense. How could he vent his anger? Lanfeng's face was full of grief and indignation. With 2 fingers, he broke the sword that had pierced through his chest. He swung his arm, and a cold glare shot out. It carried the force of thunder, and it was as fast as lightning. It was even faster than the person who attacked him, and with a bang, it struck Rue's chest, causing a splash of blood. Puff! Rue spat out a mouthful of blood. The momentum of the broken sword was like a heavy hammer hitting his chest. With a cold light pierced through his chest, he was shocked and flew out by a huge force. Juexing turned into a shadow and rushed over almost at the same time as Lanfeng's attack. Lanfeng's murderous aura suddenly appeared like a whirlwind. He stared at Rue, who was sent flying, and slapped the exposed half of the broken sword on his chest without turning his head. The flowing light shot out from his back with a spurting blood sword. The sound of wind and thunder rose again and violently shot toward Juexing. The sharp aura of the broken blade arrived in an instant, like a frosty blade sweeping over. Juexing was shocked. Lanfeng was indeed Lanfeng. His cultivation was much higher than Bingqingzi's. He was a little overconfident and overestimated himself. Just the power of the broken sword alone was not something he could withstand. In a flash of thought, Juexing's afterimage split into 3 phantasms like black smoke. The broken blade passed through the 3 phantasms almost at the moment when the 3 phantasms separated. It hit the heart-cleansing lake and made a huge splash. Juexing was so scared that he broke out in a cold sweat. Even though he had escaped this fatal blow, the sprayed blood was like a rainstorm and instantly covered the 3 wisps of black smoke that could not escape in time. The crackling sound were like beans being fried, causing the 3 wisps of black smoke to tremble like curtains. They were forcefully separated into 3 arcs that converged into a shape in the air. Juexing looked a little embarrassed when he reappeared. His black robe was full of small holes, and a few strands of black hair were scattered on the lake. This was just the appearance. His skin under the black robe was painful and numb, as if being pricked by thousands of needles. If his demonic body was not strong, he would have been beaten into a sieve. Juexing clenched his fists in the air, and the bones all over his body cracked. Black, evil spirit instantly gushed out from his body and lingered around him. Juexing, with his long hair fluttering in the wind, slowly raised his head. His cold gaze shifted from his own body to Lanfeng. He said indifferently, Senior one is indeed worthy of your reputation. This was not a compliment. Yan Juexing thought that when Rue's sneak attack first, and he would succeed with his demonic skills. But who knew that when Lan Feng was as immovable as a mountain? With just a raise of his hand, he immediately forced the two into an embarrassing situation. One of them was seriously injured when Rue was still struggling in the ruins of the wooden building that he had crashed into. However, he seemed to be injured too badly. He shook his dizzy head and could not stand up for a long time. When Lan Feng stared at him with a sorrowful expression on his face, he allowed the blood to flow from his chest and back. The blood that flowed out formed strange patterns on his gray robe, giving the illusion that his robe had been torn apart. No matter how much blood flowed, it could not drain the sorrow in his heart. He really could not think of any way that he had wronged Rue. When Lan Feng pointed a finger at his chest and channeled his strength through his meridians, immediately stopping the bleeding on his chest and back. His long but somewhat bleak body suddenly turned around and stared at Yan Juexing angrily. Ignorant junior, don't even think of leaving today. Leave your life here. Yan Juexing was waiting for him to turn around and look at him. He immediately grasped the opportunity and shouted in a deep voice, "Look at my demon eye." His eyes suddenly glowed with a demonic red light and directly looked at Lan Feng's stare. Lan Feng's expression slightly stiffened, but in the blink of an eye, his eyes suddenly glowed and he shouted angrily, "Crooked Wei, how dare you act wildly in front of me? Today I must eliminate you, you scourge." His loud and clear voice was deafening, surging layer by layer. Yan Juexing showed a pained expression. The demonic red light in his eyes suddenly disappeared. With a flick of his long hair, he spat out a mouthful of blood. Lan Feng's cultivation was profound, and his primordial spirit was as strong as steel. It was not someone that Yan Juexing could cross levels to capture. As a result, he suffered a backlash and injured himself. In fact, the demonic book had long warned that when facing an opponent with a certain level of cultivation, one should not use demon eye ecstasy lightly. Otherwise, one could easily suffer a backlash. Within a certain level of cultivation, it could be used to cross levels because the primordial spirits in this level were relatively light and easy to capture. After this level, as the opponent's primordial spirit had stabilized, it could at most be used on people of the same level. The higher the level, the more stable the primordial spirit was, and the harder it was to control. In the end, one could only control people with a lower level of cultivation. If one encountered a cultivator with attainments in the primordial spirit, one had to be extra careful even if their cultivation was lower. Otherwise, one might be controlled by the other party. This was the fatal weakness of demon eye ecstasy. But then again, if one could control it regardless of the level of cultivation, the world would have long been the world of demonic cultivators. It was not that Yan Juexing did not know this, but because of the improvement of his cultivation and the fact that he had injured Bing Qingzi with a punch, he was indeed a little overconfident. As a result, he suffered a loss in the hands of Lan Feng. As the saying goes, there must be a gain for every loss. After suffering a loss, he would remember the lesson. At this moment, a silver light suddenly flashed out from the storage bag on Lan Feng's waist. The sword moved along with his finger. Lan Feng waved his arm and pointed. The giant silver sword did not stop at all. With the momentum of a thunderbolt, it stirred up layers of almost substantial air waves and burst out. In this blow, Lan Feng did not hold back any strength. He wanted to kill Yan Juexing. The monstrous momentum rushed like a cannon. The silver light in the middle shocked Yan Juexing, who was shaken. He immediately teleported to avoid it without thinking. However, just when he appeared hundreds of meters away, he could immediately hear the roar that broke through the air. Yan Juexing slightly tilted his head and was immediately scared out of his wits. The giant silver sword almost followed him at the same time. It was frighteningly fast, and he immediately teleported to avoid it. Lan Feng stood by the lake in a blood-stained gray robe. His eyes followed Yan Juexing, who was dodging. He was completely determined to kill Yan Juexing. How could he easily escape? The lake water beside the heart-cleansing lake suddenly rippled and was pushed away layer by layer. Each wave was higher than the previous one. Just when Lanfeng's momentum soared and he wanted to fly to the sky to deal with Yan Zhuixing, there was a flapping sound in the ruins of the wooden building behind him. When Lanfeng suddenly turned back, he saw when Rui's eyes were about to crack. He coughed out mouthfuls of blood and seemed to be madly rushing over. "Bastard!" When Lanfeng shouted angrily. He was immediately furious. He raised his palm with surging momentum wrapped in murderous intent. With Wen Rui's current weak body, he would probably immediately lose his life if he were to use this palm. However, when Lanfeng's eyes met Wen Rui's unprecedented tyrannical eyes, he immediately remembered the moment when Yan Zhuixing wanted to control him with a magic eye. He instantly understood why Wen Rui's sneak attacked him. He dodged sideways to avoid Wen Rui, who was knocked down, and pointed 2 fingers on Wen Rui's back. The finger's strength easily penetrated Wen Rui's meridians, and Wen Rui immediately collapsed to the ground. At this moment, there was a sharp whistling sound in the air. When Lanfeng suddenly looked over and saw a flowing light get rid of the giant silver sword at an incredible speed. "Want to run?" When Lanfeng snorted coldly. He had disappeared. He teleported 3 times in the air and instantly caught up with Yan Zhuixing. He waved his fist and directly punched. "Leave your life here." The strong wind blew wildly in the air with astonishing momentum. Yan Zhuixing looked back and was immediately scared out of his wits. When Lanfeng had already swung his fist in front of him with a face full of anger. At this time, Yan Zhuixing had no choice but to fight. He used all his cultivation and shouted, "Magic fist!" Boom! There was a loud sound in the air, and the airwave collapsed. Yan Zhuixing made a puff sound and spat out another mouthful of blood. He was directly thrown far away by the powerful impact. However, he could not care about anything at this time. The only priority was to escape. With the help of the powerful impact, he took advantage of the magic light glimpse movement technique to the extreme and fled into the sky like a flowing light. He looked back from time to time, afraid that when Lanfeng would catch up again. When Lanfeng stopped in the air and watched Yan Zhuixing escape, his eyes were filled with disbelief. The penetrating and explosive force contained in Yan Zhuixing's punch was so strong that when Lanfeng could not believe that the punch was made by Yan Zhuixing. In fact, at this time, it was not that he did not want to chase Yan Zhuixing again, but the true vitality in his body was extremely chaotic. He had a faint feeling that he could not condense it. It seemed that the power of Yan Zhuixing's punch was still reverberating in his body. At this time, the penetrating wound on his chest and back was gurgling blood again. Unfortunately, Yan Zhuixing, who was busy running for his life, did not see this scene. Otherwise, he should be able to more or less see that when Lanfeng had almost lost the ability to fight at this time. If he could take the opportunity while he had not recovered, he would definitely be able to avenge the hatred of Ling Fong Valley. After a long time, when Lanfeng, who stopped in the air, finally recovered, he pointed a finger at his chest, and the bleeding on his chest and back was stopped again. At this time, when Lanfeng's face was a little pale, which was related to the excessive blood loss. However, with his cultivation, it was not fatal. Staring at the direction where Yan Zhuixing disappeared, when Lanfeng shook his head slightly and sighed. He knew that he had missed the opportunity and it was useless to chase. As soon as he turned around, he saw a group of Wen family disciples flying over. These disciples who were cultivating in seclusion were obviously awakened by the movement of the fight and came out of seclusion. When Lanfeng did not say a word and directly flew past them to the lakeside to carry Wen Rui back. The Wen family disciples who were so shocked that they forgot to salute took a long time to react. They looked at each other in disbelief. They actually saw the elder ancestor injured. It was really hard to believe that someone could injure the elder ancestor. Chapter 763. In the boundless mountains, a shadow suddenly fell from the sky. Yan Zhuixing, who was fleeing in panic, quickly dodged through the dense forest. He found a hidden cave in a sorry state and directly entered it. Who knew that there were two big gray wolves, one male and one female, lying inside? The two wolves were shocked, and before they could do anything, Yin punched them into a bloody mess without hesitation. He then turned around and hid in the cave covered by grass and trees, carefully watching the surroundings. He was still in the territory of Baiwan country, but he really did not dare to run anymore. Once when Lanfeng caught up with him, in terms of speed, he was frightened by the scene of when Lanfeng chasing him. In addition, the demonic aura in his body was almost exhausted. He could not run far even if he wanted to, so he had to find a hidden place to hide. After confirming that no one was chasing him, Yin Juexing's nervousness was somewhat relieved. He looked around the barren mountains. What a familiar scene. What a déjà vu. Yin Juexing sat on the ground, helplessness and desolation surging on his face. He was fleeing in panic in the barren mountains again. This was not the first or second time. Was this his fate? Yin Juexing inserted his hands into the soil. He did not expect Wen Lanfeng to be so strong. After being successfully attacked by Wen Rui, he did not even have a chance to get close to Wen Lanfeng. Based on his current cultivation, the demonic skill he cultivated could only exert its power in close combat. But even if he could get close to Wen Lanfeng, the demonic fist that he exerted with all his strength still could not hurt Wen Lanfeng. Instead, he was injured again. He did not expect that Bing Chengzi's cultivation was so different from Wen Lanfeng's. He could hurt Bing Chengzi with 60% of his strength, but he could not hurt Wen Lanfeng with 100% of his strength. Yin Juexing was speechless, regretting that he did not listen to Bing Chengzi's words and only came out after mastering the demonic skill. He did not think that Bing Chengzi did not expect that Yin Juexing would hurt him at all. Moreover, Yin Juexing was purely resisting and did not fight back at all. If Bing Chengzi really wanted to kill Yin Juexing would not be any better. After all, an expert at the late stage of soul transformation was not to be trifled with. No! Yin Juexing jumped up with a swoosh. His movement was too violent and affected his internal injuries. He immediately bent over and pressed his chest, choking a mouthful of blood. After he slowly straightened his body, his face was filled with anger and unwillingness. As he gritted his teeth, he was actually so angry that he was trembling. Now that he had calmed down, he recalled the punch that collided with Wen Lanfeng. When he was escaping, he looked back and saw that Wen Lanfeng's chest was bleeding. In other words, his punch was effective. Thinking about why Wen Lanfeng didn't chase after him. Wen Lanfeng had proven that he had the ability to kill him. So why did he stop there and watch him escape? It was obvious that Wen Lanfeng had lost the ability to chase after him. Once he figured it out, Yin Juexing immediately felt like his heart was being stabbed by a knife. He understood that he had missed the most crucial opportunity. Return now? This was impossible. With Wen Lanfeng's ability, with this period of time as a buffer, not to mention recovering from his injuries, he would at least have the ability to fight again. After fighting with him, Wen Lanfeng must have understood the power of his devil fist. If he went back to fight, it would be impossible for Wen Lanfeng to fight him in close combat. A flying sword with unparalleled power could take his life. Cough, cough. Yin Juexing coughed violently and spat out mouthfuls of blood. This was due to his anger, which aggravated his injuries. He covered his chest and looked at the blood on the ground. His gaze slowly recovered its indifference. Under the dazzling red, he gradually calmed down. His indifferent eyes stared outside the cave. Since his demonic fist had injured Wen Lanfeng, it meant that he still had a chance for revenge. Wen Lanfeng, you have so many weaknesses. It won't be too long before we meet again. Yin Juexing gritted his teeth and sat down cross-legged. He took out a panacea and began to adjust his breath to restore his body. This was the most important thing at the moment. In the sacred hall of the One family, Wen Lanfeng's personal meditation place was empty and quiet. In the corner, Wen Rui, who was chained up, lay there quietly. Although he was unconscious, Wen Lanfeng had personally sealed his dantian, making it impossible for him to use his cultivation. His serious injuries had also been healed by Wenlan Feng with his profound cultivation. There was a chance for him to recover slowly. Wenlan Feng was sitting cross-legged opposite him, healing himself. A few days later, Wenlan Feng slowly opened his eyes. Although his injuries had not healed, they were no longer a problem. He calmly looked at Wen Rue in the corner, without the slightest anger in his eyes. It was not Wen Rue's intention to sneak attack him. He was controlled by Yan Juexing. After understanding this, he could only think about how to help Wen Rue completely get rid of Yan Juexing's control. He got up and walked to the unconscious Wen Rue. Wenlan Feng looked at the person on the ground and could not help but sigh. Yanqing, we were all wrong. Yu Qianqiu was right. He remembered the scene in the cornucopia. At that time, Yu Qianqiu was determined to kill Yan Juexing and Hu Changshuo's son, Hu Yuntian. It was he who listened to Lu Yanqing and stopped him. Otherwise, with that guy's courage to do anything, it was very likely that he would have killed Yan Juexing. There would not have been the disaster of Ling Fong Valley and the disaster of Heart Cleansing Lake. However, it was too late to say anything now. Maybe he had caused big trouble for Yu Qianqiu. Yan Juexing would definitely not let him go. Wenlan Feng shook his head slightly and felt a little regretful. He helped Wen Rue up on the spot to see if he could help him get rid of Yan Juexing's control. On both sides of the road leading to Ling Fong Valley, there were stone tablets singing praises of Ling Fong Valley for saving the world and saving people. The word pious was written on the faces of the people who came and went. That was the respect for Ling Fong Valley from the bottom of their hearts. However, there was one person who did not seem to fit in with the crowd. Nobody noticed when he appeared among the passers-by. This person was wearing a black robe and walking slowly. His long black hair was draped over his shoulders. Half of his face was covered by his long hair, while the other half of his face looked unusually cold. The gaze that he revealed was as calm as stagnant water. Whether it was his temperament or attire, he was different from ordinary people. The passers-by who came and went could not help but look at him. However, they would subconsciously stay away from him. Because they were too close to each other, they felt a bone-chilling coldness, as if they weren't approaching a human, but a block of ice in the winter. After entering Ling Fong Valley, one could immediately smell the medicinal fragrance. The surrounding scenery was quiet, and the vegetation was lush and green. There were many unknown small flowers in the medicine fields on both sides of the valley. When the breeze blew, they would sway shyly, appearing small and delicate. The long-haired man in black raised his head and looked at the two big words Medicine Hut on the opposite mountain. Then, he followed the passers-by into the long row of Spirit Hut where patients were treated. The Spirit Hut was crude, but it did not lose its elegance. Even though the four sides were hollow and ventilated, the medicinal fragrance was far richer than the outside. After the long-haired man in black looked around coldly, he silently sat on the bench with the others and waited in line. Chapter 764. However, no one was willing to sit close to him. His left and right sides became empty, which was not harmonious with the surrounding atmosphere. All of a sudden, he became extremely conspicuous in the abode. It was hard not to be noticed by the disciples of Ling Fong Valley. The disciples of Ling Fong Valley who were busy in the abode all looked at him. Someone walked to his side and looked at him suspiciously. "Are you here to see a doctor?" Yan Juexing did not even look at him. He shook his head slightly and said, "I'm here to deliver a message." "Message?" That person was taken aback and asked in astonishment, "What message?" "Third brother Xian asked me to deliver the message," Yan Juexing said lightly. The ordinary people at the side naturally didn't know what he was talking about, but how could the disciples of Spirit Fong Valley not know who third brother Xian was? When they heard what he said, they quickly walked over and stared at him, but no one could see through his cultivation. The person immediately asked, "What message did third brother Xian ask you to deliver? Are you ninth brother Xian?" Yan Juexing looked at him and said lightly, Third brother Xian told me that I can only tell ninth brother Xian. Ling Fong Valley was almost turned upside down because of third brother Xian and his brothers. The person naturally knew that it was not a trivial matter. He looked around the ordinary people who were staring at them curiously and frowned. He immediately smiled and cupped his hands at Yin Juexing. It must be hard for you to come all the way here to deliver the message. Please follow me to the back of the mountain. I have some good tea to quench your thirst. Yin Juexing said lightly, It's okay. I'm not thirsty. It's good here. I'll wait for ninth brother Xian here. The disciple of Ling Fong Valley hesitated for a while and then whispered to the person beside him, Quickly go and ask ninth Uncle Master to come. The person beside him immediately ran out of the abode. The person then asked with a smile, I haven't asked for your name yet. I wonder if you can tell me. However, Yin Juexing did not speak anymore. He sat there stiffly and looked straight, as if he did not hear anything. The person was a little embarrassed, but he could not say anything. He could only wait for ninth brother Xian. Of course, he was also guarding. Since this person knew about third brother Xian, he could not let him go. Not long after, a tall and thin man in gray quickly ran into the abode. It was ninth brother Xian. The crowd parted to let him in. The disciple who answered before immediately pointed. Ninth Uncle Master, that's him. Old ninth Xian sized him up, and his pupil shrank. He discovered that this person was actually at the early stage of soul formation. However, in the cultivation world, anyone who could reach the soul formation stage was not a nobody, but he had never seen this person before. Yin Juexing tilted his head and looked at him. He slowly stood up and said indifferently, Your ninth Xian? Because the two of them had never met before, they didn't know each other. Xian Laojiao cupped his hands and said, I am indeed Xian Laojiao. I heard that you are here on behalf of my third brother. Is this true? Of course. Otherwise, I wouldn't have come all the way here, Yin Juexing said calmly. Ninth brother Xian got the confirmation and became anxious. However, when he saw the ordinary people around, he immediately waved his hand and said, Please move to the back of the mountain. We can talk slowly. No need. If you have anything to say, say it here. Yin Juexing refused. Ninth brother Xian was stunned. He looked at the crowd again and forced a smile. Then I will follow you. All right. I haven't asked for your name. Yin Juexing stared at him and slowly said word by word. Yin Juexing. When he said that, all the disciples of Ling Fong Valley were shocked, as if they were facing a great enemy. Ninth brother Xian clenched his fist so tightly that there was an explosive sound. However, he was immediately stunned, as if he had noticed something wrong. He sized up Yin Juexing again and said in a deep voice, Who exactly are you? Why did you come to my Ling Fong Valley to seek pleasure? As far as he knew, Yin Juexing was only in the early stage of tribulation passing. Moreover, one of his arms was chopped off by Yu Qianqiu. The characteristics of this person couldn't match with Yin Juexing at all. How could it be Yin Juexing? Therefore, he concluded that this person came to Ling Fong Valley to make trouble. What do you think I can gain by coming to Ling Fong Valley to pretend to be Yin Juexing? Yin Juexing snorted. His eyes suddenly glowed with a demonic red light and locked on a ninth brother Xian's eyes. Ninth brother Xian's expression instantly became dull. The surrounding people only felt that the red light was dazzling. When the red light disappeared, they looked at Yin Juexing in horror, as if they had seen a monster. They all retreated and knocked over many things. The disciples of Ling Fong Valley also stared at Yin Juexing inexplicably. They didn't know what was going on with the red light that burst out from his eyes. Yin Juexing suddenly raised his finger and pointed at the disciple of Ling Fong Valley who was talking to him before and said, Kill him. Ninth brother Xian's dull expression instantly came back to life. Without hesitation, he struck the disciple beside him with his palm. That disciple never thought that ninth brother Xian would sneak attack him. He didn't even have the thought of dodging. Immediately, he let out a shrill scream and died on the spot. Yin Juexing nodded his head in satisfaction. However, the surrounding people were terrified. Murder. Suddenly, screams could be heard from all directions. They rushed out of the abode and scrambled out of the valley. The disciples of Ling Fong Valley were also terrified. They rushed out of the abode in a flash, afraid that they would be implicated by ninth brother Xian. In an instant, Ling Fong Valley was in a mess. People were screaming and running everywhere. Inside the abode, ninth brother Xian stood beside Yin Juexing expressionlessly. Yin Juexing glanced at him, and a smile appeared on his calm face. Things went smoother than he had imagined. He had long heard that the people of Ling Fong Valley cared about their reputation under the guidance of Lu Yanqing. They definitely wouldn't fight with him in front of mortals. Therefore, he blended in with the mortals and brazenly broke into Ling Fong Valley. This method seemed easy to expose, but in fact, it was safer than sneak attacks. If he sneaked in, he might not be able to hide from the experts in the valley. For example, it was said that Lu Yanqing, the world's most beautiful woman, was beaten by Changchun from the middle stage of soul formation back to the early stage of soul formation. However, after seeing her in Cornucopia Bingqingzi, he was surprised by Lu Yanqing's miraculous hands, and her cultivation actually recovered to the middle stage of soul formation. Therefore, there was no harm done. If he sneaked in and was discovered by Lu Yanqing, he was afraid that things would not go so smoothly. Now that he had ninth brother Xian, even if Lu Yanqing used force, with two soul formation experts working together, he really didn't have to be afraid of her. Thinking of this, the smile on Yin Juexing's face became wider. In the end, he laughed wildly. His wild laughter echoed in Ling Fong Valley. The chaos in Ling Fong Valley had already alarmed the people in the medicine hut. The remaining 4 brothers of the Xian family all rushed to the scene. After seeing the situation in the abode, they looked at each other. The eldest brother of the Xian family frowned and said in a deep voice, "Ninth brother, what's going on?" On the top of Medicine Hut, Lu Yanqing, who was dressed in green, led the enchantress and Yinyu out of the small courtyard. The 3 of them stopped at the edge of the cliff and silently watched the movement below. Inside the abode, ninth brother Xian called out to them, "Eldest brother, second brother, fourth brother, eighth brother, come in for a moment." He pointed to Yin Juexing and said, "He brought news of third brother. You guys come and listen together." The 4 brothers looked at each other. The younger brother did not suspect anything was wrong when he called. Instead, he flashed in with a face full of surprise. As for the disciples of Spirit Fong Valley outside, they still did not know what had happened just now. After all, no one had ever seen anyone use the evil magic of the magic eye. They thought that the previous disciple had somehow offended Xian Laojiu. Thinking of that scene, everyone had a lingering fear in their hearts. No one stopped the 4 brothers from entering. Once the 4 brothers entered the abode, they couldn't avoid the dead bodies on the ground. Eldest brother Xian stared at the ground and frowned. "Ninth brother, what's going on?" Just as he looked up, he saw the eyes of the man in black next to ninth brother Xian explode with red light, messing up his consciousness. His expression instantly became sluggish. The other 3 immediately felt something was wrong. Especially second brother Xian. His reaction was quite fast. He immediately shouted, "Where did this demon come from?" He directly threw a palm at Yin Juexing, deciding to stop him first. Who would have thought that in a blur, ninth brother Xian had already teleported in front of him? Second brother Xian was stunned and was forced to stop. But what he never expected was that Xian Laojiu's lightning-fast punch had already landed on his chest. In a situation where he had no defense at all, he was mercilessly punched by a soul formation stage master. The situation could be imagined. Before second brother Xian could finish his words, he was sent flying by the punch. With a bang, he crashed into the abode. Blood spurted out from his mouth, spraying into the air like a blood pillar. With a bang, he fell outside, completely motionless. He didn't even have the chance to scream. Fourth brother and eighth brother Xian simply couldn't believe that all of this was real. The 2 of them were completely dumbfounded and their minds were blank. Yin Juexing, who subdued eldest brother Xian, also didn't expect such a good thing to happen. He calmly subdued the dazed 4th brother and 8th brother one by one. After the Spirit Fong Valley disciples outside the abode witnessed all of this, they were all dumbfounded. They didn't know what was going on. Normally, they were like blood brothers. Why did they start killing each other? Some of the disciples who reacted quickly recalled that Yin Juexing had previously said that his name was Yin Juexing. Coupled with his demonic red eyes, they immediately shouted, "He is Yin Juexing." That is the demon eye. Martial uncles and martial uncles are being controlled by the demon eye. When Lu Yanqing saw second brother Xian flying out of the abode, she was also a little dumbfounded. When she heard someone shouting, Yin Juexing and the demon eye, she was immediately shocked and directly teleported down. The Allure Beauty and Yin Yu looked at each other in horror, then quickly followed after them. Yin Juexing was slowly walking out of the abode. Behind him were the eldest brother, 4th brother, 8th brother, and 9th brother of the Xian clan. When Lu Yanqing landed, Yin Juexing immediately stopped and sneered. Then, 2 women landed behind Lu Yanqing, causing him to squint his eyes. He nodded slightly and said, "100 Charms Beauty and Master Yin, I didn't expect you to still be here. It really surprised me." Good, this is really good. Everyone is here. Saves me the trouble of searching everywhere. Chapter 765. He was really happy. He thought that Yu Qianshou would definitely take the 2 women away when he came here last time. He didn't expect them to still be here. If he had known this, he would have come to Spirit Fong Valley first instead of going to the one family to suffer. But then again, if he wasn't full of self-confidence and wanted to control Wen Lanfeng to help him deal with Niu Yud so that he could deal with Yu Qianshou, he wouldn't have provoked Wen Lanfeng for the time being. Lu Yanqing was even more so. To put it bluntly, Lu Yanqing was just a vase to him, no matter how beautiful she was. But controlling Wen Lanfeng would be of great use. Not to mention the shame of Spirit Fong Valley. It was estimated that Wen Lanfeng was the only one in the cultivation world who could barely be Niu Yud's opponent. Moreover, he could get the whereabouts of Yu Qianshou from Wen Lanfeng. At the same time, he could use Wen Lanfeng to intimidate those in the cultivation world who had bad intentions towards him. In short, as long as he controlled Wen Lanfeng, many troubles could be easily solved. But reality was cruel. Wen Lanfeng wasn't so easy to deal with. If Wen Rue hadn't succeeded in the sneak attack and injured Wen Lanfeng, he might have had to use blood escape to escape. Since Wen Lanfeng couldn't control him, he could only destroy him to avoid endless troubles. Moreover, after the incident with the one family, Wen Lanfeng definitely wouldn't let him go. Because of this, Lu Yanqing played a role in his eyes. This was also the purpose of his coming to Spirit Fong Valley. However, what he never thought was that Temptress and Yin were still here. One had an ambiguous relationship with Yu Qianshou, and the other was Niu Yud's woman. The harvest this time was simply too great. How could Yin Juexing not be happy when the 2 women who had a close relationship with his 2 enemies were here? Temptress and Yin Yu looked at each other speechlessly. The 3 women, including Lu Yanqing, were shocked. They had all seen Yin Juexing, and the person in front of them was indeed Yin Juexing. However, what the 3 of them couldn't understand was that didn't Yu Qianshou say that Yin Juexing's arm had been chopped off by him? Why was it still fine? Out of the 3 girls, Lu Yanqing was the most shocked. She could tell that Yin Juexing's cultivation had already reached the spirit-severing stage. When the disciples of Spirit Fong Valley saw their grandmaster, they immediately became courageous. A few disciples hurriedly carried second brother Xian's body over and cried, "Grandmaster, Master is already dead." Lu Yanqing was not a person who was easily angered. Seeing her disciple die tragically, she immediately flew into a rage. Her beautiful face was frosty as she stared at Yin Juexing and shouted, "Yin Juexing, did you kill him?" Yin Juexing smiled, but did not answer. Instead, it was the Ling Fong Valley disciple who stammered, "Grandmaster, my master was killed by 9th martial uncle." Lu Yanqing was shocked when she heard this. She glared at old 9th Xian and said, Old Ninth, is what he said true? Xian Laojiu stood obediently behind Yin Jueqing without saying a word. After Yin Jueqing looked at Lu Yanqing from head to toe, he said in a breathtaking tone, "You are indeed the world's most beautiful woman. You are indeed unparalleled in the world. No wonder when Lan Feng can't forget you. Although I have seen Senior at the cornucopia, it is a pity that I did not see your true appearance. Seeing you today, this trip was not in vain. This junior finally knows what a beauty is." Not mentioning cornucopia would have been fine, but the moment cornucopia was mentioned, Lu Yanqing regretted it so much that her intestines were about to break. If she had not stopped Yu Qianqiu from making a move, how could Spirit Fong Valley have suffered such a disaster today? For a moment, Yu Qianqiu's warning at the cornucopia kept lingering in her mind. Unfortunately, Yu Qianqiu was right. She regretted not being able to do it in the first place. Where is third brother, Xian? Was he also killed by you? Lu Yanqing's white face flashed with unease as she asked. Yin Jueqing pointed to old Ninth Xian and the others behind him and said indifferently, "Just like them, alive and well." Lu Yanqing's eyes swept over several disciples and said word by word, "Come back." However, after calling out a few times, no one listened to her. She immediately gritted her teeth, and a pair of small golden knives appeared in her hands. It seemed that she, who had always hated fighting and killing, was also about to make a move. Yin Jueqing's face revealed a sarcastic look and said indifferently, "Senior Lu, I advise you not to be impulsive. Otherwise, you will not be able to bear the consequences." As he said, he slightly tilted his head and said, "Boss Exen, your master's emotions are very unstable. You should die in front of your master and let her calm down." "Yes." Boss Xian bowed slightly and directly hit the top of his head with his palm. In an instant, red and white things burst out, and he fell to the ground on the spot. He twitched twice and stopped moving. "No!" Lu Yanqing exclaimed. The Spirit Fong Valley disciples behind were shocked and looked at the scene in front of them in disbelief. The Temptress and Yin Yu's faces also changed greatly. Only Yin Jueqing and the others were indifferent. Especially old Ninth Xian and the others. They simply did not care about the life and death of their own brothers. Yin Jueqing said indifferently, "Senior Lu, I was right. If you dare to make me unhappy again, I only need to say a word and all your disciples will die in front of you. If you don't believe me, you can try again." Lu Yanqing heard this and immediately felt a sense of powerlessness. Looking at the dead boss Xian, she was a little confused. "Senior Lu," Yin Jueqing suddenly called out softly. Lu Yanqing slowly raised her head. Just as she made eye contact with him, she immediately saw a demonic red light bursting out from his eyes. In the blink of an eye, she was in the middle of a vast sea of blood. Numerous blood vines quickly entangled her and tied her up. Lu Yanqing was shocked and immediately remembered that the other party was using the demonic eye. She immediately struggled and used all her strength to break the blood vines that tied her up. At the moment when the blood vines broke, her eyes regained clarity and the scene of Spirit Fong Valley reappeared. Yin Jueqing slightly staggered and his face was a little pale. He finally believed that the demonic eye could only be controlled by those below the soul formation stage. Once one reached the soul formation stage, he could only control opponents of the same level. With Lu Yanqing's cultivation, he had no way to control her. Amidst the exclamations of the Spirit Fong Valley disciples, the Temptress and Yin Yu supported Lu Yanqing at the same time and said anxiously in unison, "Senior, are you all right?" Lu Yanqing shook her head slightly and gritted her teeth with a pretty face. "Yin Jueqing, how dare you use the demonic eye on me?" Yin Jueqing slightly calmed down and said indifferently, "Why can't I? It's a pity that Senior Lu's cultivation is profound and this junior can't control it for the time being. What a pity." "You..." Lu Yanqing glanced at the disciples that were controlled by Yin Jueqing and swallowed the harsh words that were about to come out of her mouth. She gritted her teeth and said, "What do you want for you to let them go?" "Humph." Yin Jueqing sneered and looked back and forth between the girls. "Who can tell me where Yu Qianqiu is?" The three girls were startled. The temptress really didn't know where Yu Qianqiu was because she didn't know that Yu Qianqiu was Niu Yud. However, the other two girls knew in their hearts, but they wouldn't say it no matter what. Yin Yu could be said to be dead set on Yu Qianqiu. How could she harm Yu Qianqiu? And Lu Yanqing wasn't the kind of person who would sacrifice others to save her disciple. In the silence, Yin Jueixing indifferently said, "Since you're not saying anything, it means that someone knows but doesn't want to tell me. Senior Lu, could it be that you want your disciple to die on the spot?" Lu Yanqing's face instantly turned pale. She bit her lips and said, "I don't even know where Yu Qianqiu is. Even if you kill them all, I still won't know." Yin Jueixing was startled. How could he kill all her disciples? They were the bargaining chips to blackmail her. If he killed them all, she would immediately fight him with her life. He immediately nodded and said, "It seems that Senior Lu really doesn't know." As he spoke, the demonic red light in his eyes suddenly appeared again and directly locked onto the temptress's eyes. The temptress's expression instantly became stupid, and she foolishly walked towards him. "No!" Yin Yu immediately grabbed the temptress and refused to let her go. Yin Jueixing snorted coldly. In for a penny, in for a pound. He seized the opportunity, and his eyes turned red again. In an instant, he also controlled the careless Yin Yu in his hands. In the end, the two girls walked towards him together. Lu Yanqing quickly grabbed the two of them. Yin Jueixing angrily shouted, "If you don't want old Ninth XN to die, let go." Lu Yanqing's body trembled. She subconsciously let go and watched the two girls walk towards Yin Jueixing. Yin Jueixing snorted coldly and stared at the two girls who were walking over. He asked, "Which one of you knows where Yu Qianqiu is?" The two girls' dumbfounded expressions came back to life. The temptress shook her head to indicate that she didn't know. Yin Yu paused and then reported, "Yu Qianqiu is actually Niu Yud. Niu Yud and Yu Qianqiu are the same person. He should be in the demon domain." "What?" Yin Jueixing exclaimed. He thought that he had heard wrongly. He hurriedly asked again, "Are you sure that Niu Yud is Yu Qianqiu?" Yin Yu said respectfully, "There's no mistake. I'm sure, because I realized that Niu Yud has been wearing a human skin mask." Yin Jueixing still didn't believe it. He said, "Then why is there such a huge difference in their cultivation?" "I can't figure it out either," Yin Yu replied. Yin Jueixing was worried that she was fooling him. He checked again to make sure that Yin Yu was indeed under his control and wasn't lying. He was immediately dumbfounded. If Yin Yu hadn't told him, he would never have thought that Niu Yud was Yu Qianqiu. This also explained why Niu Yud purposely spread the news to make him be hunted even though he had no enmity with him. It turned out that it was all Yu Qianqiu's doing. Such a shameless way of doing things was indeed Yu Qianqiu's style. However, he couldn't figure out why his cultivation could shake the cultivation world when he was Niu Yud, but his cultivation was only at the tribulation stage when he was Yu Qianqiu. There was definitely a secret that he didn't know. Maybe Yu Qianqiu was playing tricks on him. Otherwise, with Niu Yud's ability, there was no reason for him to show mercy when fighting with him. At the thought of this, anger burned in his chest. He had been fooled by that guy for such a long time. It was intolerable. He suddenly turned around and said, "Senior Lu, I'm afraid I need your help with something. Please ask Senior Wen Lanfeng to come over." You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.